Chapter 990. Thousand Beasts Bridge. Wen's eyes revealed a trace of a strange expression as he looked at the dazzling corridors around him. He had just walked out of the dangerous world of lava and suddenly arrived at such an extravagant place. Anyone would feel a trace of strangeness. This should be the fourth trial. After passing this trial, there will only be one trial left. At that time, I'll be able to reach the end of the grotto. Zhuowen's eyes flickered. Back when he had challenged the world of ice, the Ice Queen had said that there were 3 more trials. He had already passed the world of lava, so there were only 2 left. This time, the Thousand Beasts Grotto was a race against time. Moreover, Zhuowen had passed the first 3 trials very quickly, especially the world of lava. With his Fire Saint Rune's ability to control fire, Zhuowen's speed was much faster than the others. For the remaining 2 trials, if Zhuowen's speed wasn't slow either, it wouldn't be a problem for him to enter the top 500. Moreover, his ranking might even be very high. Thinking of this, Zhuowen's footsteps sped up. He practically turned into an afterimage as he passed through the dazzling corridors. Very quickly, Zhuowen walked to the end of the corridor. Soon after, he arrived at a garden filled with the fragrance of flowers and the chirping of birds. Numerous Oriole-like hums were transmitted over. There were actually over a dozen beautiful figures fooling around in front of the garden. Birds chirping and fragrant flowers, beautiful scenery. The dozen or so playful beauties were all in the prime of their youth. Their figures were graceful and enchanting. Moreover, what made one's nose bleed was that these beauties were all wearing gauze. Their snow-white skin was faintly discernible under the gauze, causing one's blood to boil. "Young master, let's play together." The beauties arrived in front of Zhuowen and pulled him over without any explanation. Their bell-like voices constantly rang out in the garden. The gauze beauties all stuck close to Zhuowen. What was even worse was that one of them used her ample bosom to rub against Zhuowen's back. This caused a strange expression to appear on Zhuowen's face, as a ball of lust rose in his lower abdomen. "Young master, how about falling into the mortal world with us concubines forever? We will definitely serve young master well, and won't disappoint him." Their hot breath drifted to Zhuowen's ears. There were even a few women who were sticking close to Zhuowen. Their small, fragrant tongues were sticking out. It was indescribably seductive. Falling into the mortal world forever? Zhuowen took a deep breath and slowly spat out a word. Scram. The women's expressions changed slightly. Then, they started to entangle him again like water snakes. They used all their methods and laughed. "What? Does young master think that we are not good? Life is short and bitter. If there's wine today, there's no need for young master to face difficulties and pursue the path of the martial Tao. Why don't we just enjoy ourselves and play around in the human world? Isn't that great?" The seductive voice continued to ring out, adding a trace of enchantment and seduction. Waves of heat rose from the surroundings, and the surrounding graceful women began to dance. Their veils slowly slid down, revealing their snow-white skin and deep collarbones. "You are not qualified to make me fall into the mortal world forever." Scram. Zhuowen slowly closed his eyes. Then, a golden Buddha's eye appeared between his eyebrows. The Buddha's light covered Zhuowen's entire body, forming the shadow of an ancient Buddha behind him. Buddha says, "Everything is illusory. Only my heart is true." The sound of Sanskrit came out from the shadow of the ancient Buddha. Then golden words gushed out continuously. The terrifying Buddha's light shrouded the entire garden. At the same time, Zhuowen sat cross-legged on the ground. The Buddha's eye between his eyebrows bloomed. The shadow of the ancient Buddha stood behind Zhuowen, unmoving like a mountain. "I am the ancient Buddha." The garden, the beauties, and the beautiful scenery all disappeared at this moment. Just like Buddha says, "Everything is illusory. Only my heart is true. I grant you supreme authority. You will be able to control the life and death of countless people in the world. You will be under one and above all." The beauties disappeared. A middle-aged man in yellow robes came before Zhuowen. He promised countless benefits and bestowed endless wealth and supreme authority to Zhuowen. Zhuowen sat on the ground, his Buddha's light boundless. He wasn't affected by the authority. The scene changed again. At this moment, the members of the Zhuo family were all trapped in the Azure Emperor's Yuan energy cage. Zhuo Xiaotian was also being stepped on by the Azure Emperor. The young man looked at Zhuowen with provocation. Your father is trash. Your son is no better. You want to fight with me? Dream on. Now, not only will your father die, your family will also be destroyed. Everything you have will be destroyed by me. Moreover, I will cripple your cultivation. Not only that, I will make you suffer forever. Emperor Qing laughed maniacally, his eyes filled with arrogance. To him, Zhuowen was just a pitiful ant. Finally, Zhuowen opened his eyes slowly. He stared at the Azure Emperor and said, Don't worry. When I step into the Emperor realm, you and the Azure Mystic Empire will be completely destroyed. Now scram! After speaking, Zhuowen was still unmoved. With a wave of his sleeve, the Azure Emperor and the members of the Zhuo family were all wiped away. The scene changed again. At this moment, it was an endless azure hell. In this hell, there were mountains of corpses and seas of blood. Countless skeletons were piled up like mountains. In the sky above hell, a huge blood figure slowly walked over. Blood demon. Zhuowen looked up at the blood figure and said calmly, Hee hee, little bastard, you don't know that it's me, right? You actually dared to use the demon-sealing green coffin to imprison me. You are simply courting death. Now that I am out and my cultivation has recovered, you are dead for sure. As he said that, the blood demon extended a bloody hand that blotted out the sky and enveloped Zhuowen. He wanted to completely annihilate Zhuowen. Zhuowen calmly looked at the bloody hand that was slowly descending. His hands were behind his back. His eyes were filled with calmness. He muttered softly, Everything is illusory. Boom! The bloody hand swung down and landed on the ground. Instantly the entire space was destroyed. Terrifying cracks appeared on the ground. The sky changed color and dark clouds filled the sky. It was as if the end of the world had arrived. However, Zhuowen was as calm as water. He stood there quietly with his hands behind his back. The bloody hand fell and passed through his body. The ground cracked and revealed a deep abyss. Zhuowen was still standing at the same spot and did not fall. Lightning struck down from the dark clouds and landed on the top of his head, but it passed through Zhuowen's body. It turned out that everything was illusory. In here the world in the eyes was fake. Everything in the ears was fake. The world that the five senses sensed did not exist. The fourth stage is an illusory realm? Zhuowen's eyes flashed with a trace of golden light. It became more and more intense. The Buddha's eye between his eyebrows bloomed with golden light. The golden light instantly filled the entire space. When the golden light finally disappeared, the space returned to normal. Everything was illusory. Everything disappeared without a trace. Whether it was glory, wealth, or prosperity, everything disappeared. Only a barren land was left. Standing quietly in this barren land, Zhuowen tilted his head and looked at the end of the barren land. There was a deep cave there. That cave should be the exit of this illusory realm. The last stage. A look of excitement appeared in Zhuowen's eyes. With a stomp of his foot, he instantly entered the cave. After the cave, there was one grotto after another. Zhuowen passed through one grotto after another, and finally reached the end. Zhuowen's footsteps also stopped. At this moment, in front of Zhuowen, there was a huge beast. This beast was extremely illusory. What was even more strange was that this beast's head was constantly changing. It was as if this beast had tens of thousands of beast heads. It looked extremely strange. On the back of this giant beast was a huge stone bridge. This stone bridge narrowed slowly from the beginning to the end, and there were 16 figures standing on this stone bridge. The 16 figures were all dressed in black robes. Their entire faces were covered by black hats. It was impossible to see their true faces. Zhuowen found that the strength of these 16 figures ranged from the early stage of the Xuanzuan realm to the peak of the Heavenly Master realm. Each person was in a different realm. There were exactly 16 people. If we pass through this giant beast bridge, we should be able to reach the exit. And this last stage is for everyone to pass together? Staring at the giant beast bridge, Zhuowen also noticed that there were caves in front of the bridge. These caves were exactly the same as the one Zhuowen had come out of. Clearly, these caves were the exits of the other participants. It was clear that this final trial wasn't a trial for individuals, but a trial for all the martial artists who were challenging the myriad beast grotto. What are the rules of this last stage? Zhuowen asked the black-robed man at the front of the giant beast's head. Originally, Zhuowen only wanted to give it a try. He didn't expect the black-robed man to really answer his question. The Thousand Beast Bridge has 16 sovereigns. Their strength ranges from the early stage of the Xuanzuan realm to the peak of the Dao Heavenly Master realm. The final ranking is based on the time taken to pass the Thousand Beast Bridge and arrive here, the black-robed man said coldly. In other words, if two people defeat the same number of venerables on the 10,000 Beasts Bridge, the person who arrives first will be ranked higher? Zhuowen asked with bright eyes. You are very smart. This is the rule of the Thousand Beasts Bridge. The black-robed man nodded. Then, am I the first person to arrive here? Zhuowen asked again. Zhuowen believed that with the speed he'd passed through the trials earlier, and because his cultivation was only at the Exalt realm, the difficulty of the trials he'd set wouldn't be too difficult. So, Zhuowen felt that his speed was rather fast, and it shouldn't be a problem for him to arrive here before the others. No one has attempted the Thousand Beast Bridge yet. You are the first, the black-robed man said indifferently. Oh, I'm the first. Zhuowen was stunned. He didn't expect to be the first to arrive at the Thousand Beast Bridge. In other words, if he, Zhuowen, defeated all 16 sovereigns on the Thousand Beast Bridge, then the title of first place among the new students would be his. Even if the powerful Yuan Zhao had the strength to defeat all 16 sovereigns, it was impossible for him to surpass him. After all, Zhuowen was the first to arrive at the Thousand Beast Bridge. Moreover, he had defeated all 16 sovereigns. Yuan Zhao was powerful, but it was impossible for him to surpass Zhuowen. Chapter 991. The last stage. Zhuowen took a step forward and rushed towards the first black-robed man. The battle intent on his body was monstrous, forming a terrifying storm of energy behind him. The first black-robed man slowly opened his eyes, which were filled with indifference. He took a step forward and blocked in front of Zhuowen. Get lost! Zhuowen's right palm suddenly blasted out, and a terrifying yuan power poured out. The first black-robed man didn't even have the chance to make a sound before he was smashed to pieces by Zhuowen. The cultivation of the first black-robed man was only at the initial stage of the Xuanzuan realm, which was too weak for Zhuowen. However, what surprised Zhuowen was that after the first black-robed man was smashed into nothingness, another black-robed man appeared in his original position. He sat cross-legged and didn't even look at Zhuowen. Obviously, after Zhuowen killed the first black-robed man, this new black-robed man replaced the one that was killed. He had already tacitly allowed Zhuowen to pass through this place. Not a real person nor an illusion? Then what kind of existence are these black-robed men? Looking at the new black-robed man sitting in the first black-robed man's position, Zhuowen discovered that this black-robed man's aura was exactly the same as the one that was killed. They were basically the same person. After thinking for a moment, Zhuowen stopped thinking about this somewhat profound question and walked towards the second black-robed man. The second black-robed man did the same thing as the first black-robed man. When Zhuowen approached, he blocked Zhuowen's path and launched his own attack. Unfortunately, the second black-robed man was only at the intermediate stage of the Xuanzuan realm, and Zhuowen still annihilated him with a single palm. Dang dang dang. Footsteps slowly sounded from the myriad beasts bridge. The four black-robed men from the Xuanzuan realm couldn't stop Zhuowen at all. They couldn't even take a single blow from Zhuowen. So Zhuowen easily crossed the Xuanzuan realm and arrived in front of the four supreme realm black-robed men. The three black-robed men at the early stage, mid-stage, and late-stage supreme being realm still couldn't force Zhuowen to use his weapon. Zhuowen annihilated the three of them with a single palm strike and arrived in front of the black-robed man at the peak supreme being realm. To be able to possess such terrifying combat prowess at the late stage of the supreme realm, your talent is truly frightening. However, if you wish to pass through this trial of mine so easily, you will have to use your full strength. I'm afraid you won't stand a chance. The black-robed man at the peak of the supreme realm said indifferently, I don't need to use my full strength to deal with you. Zhuowen shook his head. How arrogant. Let's see if your strength is as powerful as your mouth. After the black-robed man at the peak of the supreme realm finished speaking, he stomped his foot and a terrifying aura surged out. He slammed his right palm forward, and a dark energy burst out, forming countless black chains that attempted to bind Zhuowen. Scram! Zhuowen waved his right hand, and the blood spear appeared in his palm. Following which, a terrifying spear aura erupted and countless blood seas surged out of the void, and swept towards the black-robed man, at the peak of the supreme realm. Boom! In a single exchange, the black-robed man was turned into dust by the blood seas. Zhuowen also crossed the supreme realm area, and arrived in front of the 4 black-robed men, at the golden supreme being realm. A mere supreme realm cultivator actually managed to break into the golden supreme being realm area. How rare. Unfortunately, you won't be able to pass through me. The black-robed man at the early stage golden supreme being realm slowly stood up with a cold smile on his face. However, before he could finish speaking, the blood seas turned into a terrifying blood vortex, and instantly engulfed the black-robed man. The black-robed man was annihilated before he could even react. You talk too much, Zhuowen muttered as he swept towards the middle stage golden supreme being realm black-robed man. The middle stage golden supreme being realm black-robed man did not dare to be negligent. He had clearly seen the fate of the early stage golden supreme being realm cultivator. Although the young man before him was only at the late stage supreme realm, his combat strength was terrifying. It's actually the force of heaven and earth. No wonder you could instantly kill an early stage golden supreme being realm cultivator. Your combat strength is terrifying, and I am no match for you. The middle stage golden supreme being realm black-robed man looked at the blood seas that surrounded Zhuowen and nodded. He simply gave up resisting, and opened up a path for Zhuowen. I don't have to kill you black-robed men to pass through? Seeing that the middle stage golden supreme being realm black-robed man in front of him took the initiative to open up a path, Zhuowen asked in surprise. The black-robed man looked at Zhuowen strangely and said, "The rules did not say that you have to kill the black-robed men. As long as you can cross over the black-robed men, it will be fine." Hearing that, Zhuowen nodded speechlessly. He had misunderstood the rules all along. If he had known earlier, he would not have needed to expend so much effort to kill the black-robed men. He could have just used his speed to cross over the black-robed men. At the thought of this, Zhuowen suddenly grew 3 pairs of lightning wings on his back. With a stomp of his feet, he turned into an illusory lightning radiance, and instantly dodged the black-robed men, who were at the late stage and peak of the golden supreme being realm. The 2 black-robed men had wanted to intercept Zhuowen midway. Unfortunately, Zhuowen's speed was beyond their expectations. Although the 2 of them pounced at the same time, they could not stop Zhuowen. They could only watch as the lightning radiance that Zhuowen had turned into flashed past them. Stay here. How dare a mere supreme being attempt to pass through the Heavenly Venerables area? In the Heavenly Venerables area, the early stage Heavenly Venerables black-robed man suddenly opened his eyes. His gaze was extremely sharp. He grabbed at the void with his claws, and an extremely thick wall of yuan qi formed around him. His purpose was to prevent Zhuowen from using his speed to pass through his area. Boom! Zhuowen slammed heavily into the wall of yuan qi, causing it to shake violently. However, it did not collapse. Instead, it shook a few times and returned to normal. Swoosh! Zhuowen stopped in front of the early stage Heavenly Venerables black-robed man. His gaze was extremely cold as he said, "You intend to stop me? You are merely a supreme being. If I allow you to pass through, won't I become a laughing stock?" The early stage Heavenly Venerables black-robed man sneered. Zhuowen nodded and said, "In that case, let's fight." As he spoke, Zhuowen displayed his 4 heads and 8 arms. He held 8 blood spears in his hands and displayed 8 Azura blood spear auras. 8 blood rivers burst out from the void and surrounded the early stage Heavenly Venerables black-robed man, like 8 waterfalls. The black-robed man's expression was extremely ugly. The strength that this supreme being had displayed was somewhat beyond his expectations. He was clearly only a supreme being, but he was actually able to display such a terrifying attack. "Strangle," Zhuowen said indifferently. Then, the early stage Heavenly Venerables black-robed man's eyes bulged slightly. He was completely shredded into nothingness by the 8 blood rivers. "You also want to stop me?" After killing the early stage Heavenly Venerables black-robed man, Zhuowen took a step forward and arrived in front of the middle stage Heavenly Venerable's black-robed man. His eyes were filled with a hint of bloodlust. "You're very strong, but the gap between us is huge. Are you really confident that you can pass through me?" The middle stage Heavenly Venerable's black-robed man stood in front of Zhuowen and said expressionlessly. Zhuowen didn't speak, but the battle intent on his body became even more tyrannical and intense. This performance already represented Zhuowen's answer. Whoosh! Whoosh! Suddenly, two ear-piercing sounds came from this space. Then two figures rushed out from two of the numerous caves in front of the Myriad Beasts Bridge. Of the two figures, one was dressed in plain clothes and had an ordinary appearance. He was the eldest prince of the Yaoguang sacred dynasty Yuan Zhao. The other person had a long sword on his back, and his spine was straight like an unsheathed sword. He looked extremely terrifying. He was the genius of the Myriad Sword sect Pom Pom. Two of the three monstrous Heavenly Venerables had actually come out from the grotto at the same time. Their strength couldn't be underestimated. The two looked at each other and saw the sharpness in each other's eyes. Pom Pom smiled and said, "Brother Yuan Zhao, it seems that we came out from the grotto together. It's fate." Yuan Zhao said indifferently, "It is indeed fate. However, I think there should be another checkpoint. After all, this space doesn't seem to be the exit of the Myriad Beasts Grotto." Pom Pom nodded and said, "This should be the fastest time for the two of us to come here. Brother Yuan Zhao, look over there. Perhaps the last checkpoint is that stone bridge. Let's go take a look." Yuan Zhao also nodded. Soon after, the two of them arrived in front of the 10,000 Beasts Bridge. Of course, the two of them also asked some questions about the rules of this checkpoint, like Zhuowen did. The first black-robed man naturally explained everything in a serious manner. After hearing the rules, Yuan Zhao and Pom Pom both released a terrifying aura. Pom laughed loudly and said, "The rules of the Bridge of 10,000 Beasts really suit my temperament. Whoever crosses the bridge first and defeats the most venerables will be ranked first in this year's new student assessment. Brother Yuan Zhao, although you're an early-stage Heavenly Venerate, I'm a sword cultivator. Coupled with the powerful offensive sword techniques of the Myriad Sword sect, you might not have much of an advantage." Yuan Zhao's aura wasn't any weaker than Pom Pom's. In fact, he was even slightly stronger. His eyes were also filled with battle intent. He smiled and said, "That might not be the case. However, it's still too early to say that. Only when we go up and try will we know who's stronger and who's weaker." "Haha, Brother Yuan Zhao is right. Let's go up and try." Pom laughed loudly, his body radiating sharp sword energy. Just as the two of them were about to step onto the Myriad Beasts Bridge to compete, a loud shout rang out from the other end of the bridge. At the same time, a torrential aura transformed into a ring-shaped wave of energy that spread towards them. The two of them, who were originally filled with fighting spirit, suddenly felt a chill in their hearts. The two of them hadn't even gone up yet, so how could there be such a fierce battle on the 10,000 Beast Bridge? Could it be that someone had already gone up the 10,000 Beast Bridge before them? At the thought of this, the two of them finally looked at the end of the bridge. There, they saw a black-haired, black-eyed youth holding a crimson spear. He was engaged in a fierce battle with the mid-stage Heavenly Venerate black-robed person. Boom! Boom! Chapter 992. Chasing and being chased. At this moment, in the Thousand Beasts Stonebridge area, a young man with long hair fluttering in the wind held a crimson spear in his hand. He was surrounded by 8 blood seas and was engaged in a fierce battle with a middle-stage Heavenly Venerate. Pom Deva and Yuan Zhao stared at the young man in disbelief. The young man who was fighting was Zhuowen, a mere supreme being. Before the Thousand Beasts Grotto, Yuanxing and Yuan Kong of the Yaoguang sacred dynasty had a conflict with Zhuowen. However, both of them had suffered a great loss. Yuan Zhao was about to take action, but he was stopped by the dean. "It's Zhuowen? That brat is one step ahead of us?" Yuan Zhao's eyes darkened as a murderous intent flashed in his eyes. His second and third brothers had been humiliated by Zhuowen in front of so many people. It was a slap to the face of the Yaoguang holy dynasty. Yuan Zhao was determined to get back at Zhuowen. Moreover, Yuan Zhao had already regarded the title of newcomer king as his own. Therefore, he had spared no effort to pass through the grotto as quickly as possible. Although Pomme Depart had appeared in front of the Thousand Beasts stone bridge with him, Yuan Zhao was confident in his own strength. Even though Pomme Depart was a powerful sword cultivator, he still thought that he had a great advantage and would pass through the grotto earlier than Pomme Depart. However, he had never expected that someone had already arrived in front of him and Pomme Depart. Moreover, that person was Zhuowen, who had a conflict with Yuan Zhao before. That little bastard. Brother Pomme Depart, let's attack him together. We can't let that little bastard pass through the heavenly venerate area. If he defeats the last supreme being, we won't be able to take first place, Yuan Zhao said coldly. Pomme Master's expression was somewhat ugly. He had not expected that Zhuowen would arrive even faster than him and Yuan Zhao. Therefore, his eyes contained traces of hostility when he looked at Zhuowen's figure in battle. Brother Yuan Zhao is right. Let's work together and eliminate Zhuowen. As for the new champion, we'll decide it later. Pomme Depart nodded and agreed with Yuan Zhao's suggestion. Go! After reaching an agreement, the two of them stomped their feet and flew out at the same time. A terrifying aura burst out from their bodies and turned into a terrifying vortex storm behind them. Yuan Zhao and Palm Tree have arrived. Boom! With a loud explosion, Zhuowen took a few steps back. Soon after, his eyes noticed the two figures charging over from the Thousand Beasts stone bridge. Yuan Zhao and Pom Pom were both monstrous celestial venerables. Pom Pom was an early-stage celestial venerate sword cultivator, while Yuan Zhao was a mid-stage celestial venerate. His combat power was probably even more terrifying than Pom Pom's. Either one of them could threaten Zhuowen. Zhuowen knew that if he allowed the two of them to reach his side, he might really be eliminated by the two of them. I have to get through the Empyrean area as soon as possible. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed. 4 heads and 8 arms grew out of his body. His combat strength soared to the extreme. Terrifying fighting spirit gushed out continuously, causing Zhuowen's robes and long hair to flutter in the wind. His aura was like a rainbow. Kill! As he stepped out, a sea of blood gathered. The 8 blood spears were like 8 heavenly pillars that could shatter heaven and earth, crushing down. The mid-stage celestial venerate black-robed man's expression changed slightly. He didn't expect Zhuowen's attack to become so fierce. It was beyond his expectations. However, the black-robed man was also difficult to deal with. His lower abdomen shrank, and his entire body arched into the shape of a shrimp. Then he loosened his body and shot out like an arrow from a bow. He waved his palms. Black light filled the air and turned into 2 huge black blades that were dozens of feet long. Slash! The 2 black blades slashed out and collided with the 8 blood spears. Then, an earth-shattering sound resounded and the entire stone bridge shook. Thud! 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 To the black-robed man's horror, the 8 blood spears were too terrifying. The crushing power spread out. He felt as if he was holding 8 huge mountains in his hands. He couldn't help but take a few steps back, his face pale. Zhuowen stepped on the 8 blood spears. His eyes were cold. He stomped his feet, and a terrifying force gushed out. The black-robed man's knees were slightly bent. He was faintly unable to withstand the force. Let's go! At the same time, Zhuowen took a step forward and passed over the black-robed man's head. He instantly arrived in front of the 15th black-robed man. The 15th black-robed man's strength had reached the late-stage heavenly venerate. He was originally sitting cross-legged, but he slowly stood up. He glanced indifferently at Zhuowen and said, "You're only at the late-stage sovereign stage, but you've reached the late-stage heavenly venerate. Your talent and potential are terrifying, but this is the end. If you want to leave the Myriad Beast Bridge now, I can let you go. Even if you didn't pass all the 16 sovereigns on the Myriad Beast Bridge, you should be able to enter the top 3 since you've passed 14. You should let go when it's time to let go. Otherwise, you'll only lose more." Zhuowen nodded and said seriously, "You're right, but I still want to give it a try." The 15th black-robed man looked at the serious young man in front of him in astonishment. He didn't expect that the young man would still want to force his way through despite his earnest persuasion. "Zhuowen, stop right there, or you'll end up in a miserable state." A loud shout suddenly rang out. Yuan Zhao and Palm Tree were rushing through the stone bridge like a hot knife through butter. Both of them possessed extraordinary battle strength, so it only took them an instant to reach the black-robed man's area. The loud shout just now had come from Yuan Zhao. At this moment, Yuan Zhao was like a hot knife through butter. Even though he was in the Golden Venerate's area, he still managed to kill the black-robed man in one move. He was even faster than Palm Tree. Zhuowen frowned slightly. Yuan Zhao was so powerful that he could reach the black-robed man's area so quickly. I can't let Yuan Zhao get close. Otherwise, I'll be in trouble. With that, Zhuowen stomped his foot and his aura surged out. He didn't waste any more words with the 15th black-robed man and directly attacked. Seeing Zhuowen's attack, the black-robed man knew what Zhuowen's choice was. The aura of an advanced heavenly venerate surged out from his body as he pushed out his right palm and blasted it towards Zhuowen. Immediately, countless palm prints appeared and enveloped Zhuowen. Boom! Zhuowen tapped his forehead with his right hand, and a terrifying mind power surged out. Then, the infinite sword formation turned into rays of sword light and appeared around Zhuowen. Flowing sword style. As for Zhuowen, he used his fifth sword move, flowing sword style. Suddenly, one sword beam after another transformed into a terrifying sword beam storm, which revolved around Zhuowen. Boom! 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 The palm prints collided with the sword light storm, causing a series of explosions. The surrounding space also fell into a state of collapse and trembling. What a powerful mind power. No wonder he dared to enter the Heavenly Venerate's area. It turns out that he was hiding such a powerful mind power. Yuan Zhao and Palm Tree, who were in the Golden Venerate's area, also noticed the battle situation on Zhuowen's side. When they saw the huge sword light storm formed by the infinite sword formation, their faces turned gloomy. Zhuowen's battle strength was already very terrifying. With the help of his mind power, the strength he could unleash would definitely be terrifying. Azura Blood Spear style. Divine Sun Cauldron. Zhuowen no longer held back. The moment his mind power surged out, he used the Azura Blood Spear style and the Divine Sun Cauldron. The sea of blood and the sun's fire intersected and rushed toward the black-robed man. The black-robed man was shocked. He spat out his palm, and countless ghostly phantoms appeared behind him. These phantoms extended countless tentacles and rushed toward the Azura Blood Spear style and the sun's fire, blocking them for a moment. Late-stage Heavenly Venerate warriors are really terrifying. Looking at the black-robed man who blocked the Azura Blood Spear style and the sun's fire again, Zhuowen's gaze became somewhat serious. Then he slowly closed his eyes. When he opened them again, his black pupils had turned dark gold. Dragon Soul Realization. Zhuowen mumbled softly. Cold dragon scales covered his entire body, and he instantly transformed into a dragon man. Hideous bone spikes grew out of his elbows, back, knees, and all over his body. He looked terrifying and powerful. A supreme surging aura burst out. At this moment, Zhuowen's aura in his dragon man form was much stronger than before. Is this a dragon soul? Why is it so strange? At this moment, Yuan Zhao and Palm Tree finally arrived where the black-robed man was at the early stage Heavenly Venerate. However, their attention was also attracted by Zhuowen, who had transformed into a dragon man. In particular, the dragon soul aura on Zhuowen's body made them frown slightly. They had seen dragon soul warriors before. Moreover, warriors who used dragon soul realization were much stronger than ordinary warriors. However, dragon soul realization was usually a giant dragon. However, Zhuowen's dragon soul realization made Yuan Zhao and Palm Tree extremely surprised. It seemed that Zhuowen's dragon soul was attached to the surface of this child. It looked extremely strange, but they naturally recognized the dragon soul aura on his body. Dragon Strangle. Zhuowen, who had transformed into a dragon man, stepped into the void. He was like a fighting machine with sharp weapons all over his body. The black-robed man finally showed a cautious expression. Zhuowen's dragon soul realization gave him a terrifying feeling, so he had to be cautious. Thousand Palm Imprint. The black-robed man roared and pushed out his palms. Black light as deep as the abyss. Palm imprints filled the sky and covered the entire Myriad Beast Bridge like dark clouds, covering the sky and the sun. Zhuowen's attack came as expected. His hands turned into huge dragon claws, and then his entire body spun rapidly in the air like a spinning top being whipped. Then Zhuowen, who was spinning at high speed, suddenly fell down. Boom, boom, boom. The 1,000 palm imprints attack was terrifying and intense. Layers of palm imprints surged up and turned into a sea of palm imprints, sealing Zhuowen in all directions. Zhuowen snorted coldly. His entire body was like a whirlwind, and there were weapons all over his body. He blasted out palm imprints one after another, especially the bone spurs all over his body. With the surge of power, they blocked all the palm imprints that were close to his body. Chapter 993. The Last Black-Robed Man Destroy. Zhuowen's gaze was incomparably cold. With a twist of his waist, a terrifying power poured out, forming an extremely terrifying hurricane on the spot. Boom, boom, boom. Immediately, the thousands of palm prints in the surroundings were completely destroyed by the destructive power. Zhuowen, who had turned into a dragon man, arrived in front of the black-robed man in an instant. He raised his right knee and a powerful force swept out, creating countless hurricanes. The black-robed man's eyes darkened. He waved his right palm and dark energy surged out, forming a black energy barrier. Bang! His knee swept out, and the sharp bone spikes slammed into the black energy barrier. Immediately, the black energy barrier shook violently, and the black-robed man took a step back. Break! 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 Zhuowen was like a hurricane. His limbs were like the wind, constantly bombarding the black energy barrier. Whether it was the bone spike on his elbow, or the bone spike on his knee, all of them were aimed at the black energy barrier. The terrifying energy around Zhuo, when in his dragon man form, turned into a terrifying whirlwind. It was as if these whirlwinds were dancing with Zhuowen at the center. Boom, boom, boom. Finally, the black energy barrier began to tremble violently. Then a crisp cracking sound resounded. Terrifying cracks appeared on the barrier's surface. Bang! In the end, the black energy barrier completely shattered under the shocked gaze of the black-robed person. Zhuowen's right fist, which was covered in dragon scales, had already arrived and heavily smashed into the black-robed person's chest. Thud! 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 The black-robed man took dozens of steps back, and his body began to fade. Clearly, the black-robed man had been completely defeated this time. Congratulations, you've passed my trial. The black-robed man nodded at Zhuowen, and finally disappeared. In the place of the 15th black-robed man on the stone bridge, an advanced heavenly venerate black-robed man reappeared. Zhuowen passed the 15th black-robed man, and arrived in front of the 16th black-robed man. His sharp eyes stared at the last venerate, who was also the strongest black-robed man on the Bridge of Beasts. He was a peak heavenly venerate martialist. The last black-robed man's gaze landed on Zhuowen. There was a trace of surprise in his eyes. The young man before him was only at the late stage Supreme Being stage, yet he was able to stand in front of him. This lad was truly terrifying. Zhuowen, now, I want you to leave the Myriad Beast Bridge immediately. Otherwise, your end will be miserable beyond your imagination. When Zhuowen arrived in front of the peak heavenly venerable black-robed man, Yuan Zhao and Pom-Pom's eyelids twitched. Their eyes were filled with shock and anger. The scene of this kid defeating the late-stage heavenly venerable black-robed man was still vivid in their minds. The two of them finally felt a sense of threat from Zhuowen. They could not allow Zhuowen to pass the last black-robed man. Otherwise, the first place among the freshmen would become a foregone conclusion. If they could kick Zhuowen out of the Bridge of Beasts now, the two of them would still have a chance to take first place. Otherwise, they would have no chance at all. Zhuowen stood calmly in front of the peak heavenly venerable black-robed man. He naturally heard Yuan Zhao shout behind him, but he ignored it. Instead, he stared at the black-robed man in front of him. The black-robed man was very strong. A peak heavenly venerable black-robed man was not easy to deal with. Although the black-robed men on the Bridge of Beasts were generally weaker than ordinary martialists of the same level, they could not use spiritual treasures or other means. They could only rely on their own realm and skills to attack. Therefore, the black-robed men were much easier to deal with than ordinary martialists of the same level. However, The black-robed man in front of them was still a peak heavenly venerable. Even if he did not use spiritual treasures or other means, he was still not someone an ordinary supreme being could resist. After all, the gap between a peak heavenly venerable and a late-stage supreme being was too great. It was like a chasm that was unreachable. Looks like I have to go all out, Zhuowen muttered in a low voice. The aura on his body began to rise. Inky black energy gushed out from the countless dragon scales, forming a huge black dragon phantom behind him. The black dragon phantom's pupils were dark gold. It looked cold and ruthless, cruel and overbearing. Charge! Zhuowen roared. He stomped his foot, and a terrifying force spread throughout the bridge of beasts. Then the bridge of beasts trembled violently. Zhuowen shot forward like a cannonball, instantly arriving in front of the black-robed man. His elbows, knees, and head were like sharp weapons, constantly attacking the black-robed man. The attack was extremely terrifying. It was like a torrential storm. It was continuous and incessant. Zhuowen had used this torrential attack to pressure the 15th black-robed man, until he was flustered and caught off guard. In the end he was killed by Zhuowen. However, the strength of this 16th black-robed person was far stronger than the previous one. His gaze was indifferent as he slowly extended both of his hands, casually blocking Zhuowen's storm-like attacks. Everything seemed to be done in a very casual manner. Your strength is not bad, but it is far from enough to defeat me. Don't waste your energy. You can choose to leave the Bridge of Beasts now. Your result will not be bad this time, the black-robed man said indifferently. Zhuowen shook his head. He had to ensure that he was 100% sure that he would be first among the new students. To achieve this goal, he had to defeat the last black-robed man. This little bastard. Looking at Zhuowen's actions, Yuan Zhao's eyes darkened. He slammed out a palm and destroyed the middle stage Heavenly Master black-robed man. Soon, he arrived in front of the late-stage Heavenly Master black-robed man. As for Pom Pom, his speed was not weak either. He was a sword cultivator, and had mastered powerful sword force. His sword slashed out with monstrous power. Even the early-stage Heavenly Master black-robed man was killed by his sword. However, Pom Pom's cultivation was weaker than Yuan Zhao's, so his speed was slower. When Yuan Zhao arrived in front of the late-stage Heavenly Master black-robed man, Pom Pom had just arrived in front of the middle-stage Heavenly Master black-robed man. The late-stage Heavenly Master black-robed man was not weak. Even Yuan Zhao had to take him seriously. Soon, a terrifying battle broke out between the two. The shockwaves from the battle were extremely terrifying. Swoosh! Swoosh! At the same time, many figures rushed out of the caves in front of the Myriad Beasts Bridge. Among them were the Alcade Holy Dynasty's second Prince Yuan Kong and third Prince Yuan Sheng, the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty's Crown Prince Yin Zhongyang, and Blue Smoke. Even the geniuses from the other two holy dynasties and sects had arrived at the same time. It was worth noting that Mo Lingtian was also among them. It seemed that Mo Lingtian's strength was not simple. He was able to arrive at the Myriad Beasts Bridge so quickly. Looking at the remaining figures, Yin Zhongyang's eyes darkened. He did not expect to come out with a group of golden exalts. It was a little humiliating for him. Boom! 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 The sounds of battle filled the air. Then, Yin Zhongyang and the others noticed the earth-shattering battle taking place on the Myriad Beasts Bridge. It really is Yuan Zhao and Palm Tree. These two are the fastest. They're actually already challenging the Thousand Beasts Bridge. Yin Zhongyang quickly noticed the battle on the Thousand Beasts Bridge, and muttered to himself with a dark look in his eyes. The rest of the crowd's attention was also attracted by the battle on the Thousand Beasts Bridge. They did not react much when they saw Yuan Zhao and Pom Pom. After all, they were well aware of how powerful Yuan Zhao and Pom Pom were. In fact, many people secretly guessed that the title of newcomer king would fall into the hands of either Yuan Zhao or Pom Pom. As for Yin Zhongyang, he was faintly ignored by everyone. After all, Yin Zhongyang's strength was the weakest among the three heavenly masters. Moreover, he was arrogant and unruly, offending many people. Wait! Why are there three people on the Myriad Beasts Bridge? Who's the other one? Soon someone noticed the last person. The last person was standing at the end of the Myriad Beasts Bridge, and was fighting the last black-robed man. Yuan Zhao was only one black-robed man away from this person. It could be said that they were extremely close. As soon as this person spoke, everyone's gaze shifted to the front. Sure enough, they saw the figure fighting the black-robed man. However, the strange thing was that this figure was wrapped in dragon power. It looked neither human nor ghost. No one could recognize what this thing was. Zhuowen, stop right now. Otherwise I won't let you go. An angry roar was heard. Everyone realized that the owner of the roar was Yuan Zhao. At this moment, Yuan Zhao was fighting with a late-stage Heavenly Master Warrior. His gaze would occasionally land on the dragon man in front of him. It's Zhuowen. How did Zhuowen become like this? Everyone was stunned at first. Then, they couldn't help but have a strange look on their faces. Judging from the situation of the three people, it seemed that Zhuowen was ahead of Yuan Zhao and Pom Pom. In other words, if Zhuowen could really beat Yuan Zhao to the 16th black-robed man, the first place of the new students might change hands. Whoosh! There was a piercing sound. Before anyone could react, Yin Zhongyang had already turned into a shadow and rushed out. He instantly stepped onto the Myriad Beasts bridge. The others also reacted. They knew that now wasn't the time to discuss this. They had to race against time and cross the Myriad Beasts bridge first. In an instant, more than a dozen people turned into shadows and stepped onto the Myriad Beasts bridge. The originally quiet Myriad Beasts bridge gradually became lively. Whoosh! Zhuowen groaned and took a few steps back. He stared at the black-robed man in front of him with a gloomy look. The black-robed man, at the peak of the Heavenly Master level, was very powerful. He gave Zhuowen a feeling that he couldn't resist. Break it! Suddenly, a loud roar came from behind. Then Zhuowen's eyes narrowed. Yuan Zhao had actually destroyed the 15th black-robed man with a single palm. At this moment he was rushing over. Little bastard, you dare to compete with me for first place? Then die. As soon as Yuan Zhao arrived, his right palm suddenly blasted out. Terrifying origin energy poured out and turned into a huge origin energy palm. It crushed down heavily on Zhuowen. Chapter 994. Yuan Zhao and the Palm Dragon Strangulation. Zhuowen let out a low roar. With a twist of his waist and a stomp of his leg, his entire body shot out like a cannonball, transforming into a terrifying hurricane. The black dragon behind him was unwilling to be outdone, as it surged towards Yuan Zhao's Yuan Power Palm that was crushing down. Bang! The energy whirlwind formed by the dragon grind instantly collided with the Yuan Power Palm. Subsequently, the whirlwind was completely suppressed, while Zhuowen's spinning body also came to a halt, as he involuntarily staggered backwards. Do you really believe that you can match up against me at the late sovereign stage? Wishful thinking. If you don't want to die, hurry up and get out of the Thousand Beast Bridge. Yuan Zhao stood on top of the Yuan Power Palm and looked down at Zhuowen, who was at the end of the bridge. His eyes were filled with indifference. You want me to get out of the Thousand Beast Bridge? I don't think you have the qualifications to do so. Zhuowen's eyes were exceedingly calm. With a stomp of his foot, 3 pairs of lightning wings grew out from his back. However, the 3 pairs of lightning wings were infected by an ink-black energy, transforming into 3 pairs of dragon wings that were several feet long. At the same time, Zhuowen's aura also became much more terrifying than before. Oh, you don't know the difference between life and death. Looks like you're really courting death. Yuan Zhao's eyes narrowed as his foot ferociously stomped down. The Yuan Power Palm beneath his feet emitted a rumbling sound as it descended from the sky like a giant mountain, heading straight for Zhuowen's head in an attempt to completely envelop him. Dragon Scale Guard. Zhuowen growled. His hands transformed into dragon claws as he ferociously slammed them towards the ground. Instantly, the giant black dragon shadow hovering behind him coiled around Zhuowen, completely surrounding him, as if it was protecting him. Boom! The Yuan Power Palm slammed down, heavily smashing against the coiling dragon that was protecting Zhuowen. An earth-shattering dragon roar sounded out. The black dragon's eyes were filled with an unyielding look, as it actually blocked the terrifying Yuan Power Palm in the sky. Thud! At the same time, Zhuowen stomped his foot, and 3 pairs of dragon wings unfurled. His speed soared to the extreme. However, He did not fly towards Yuan Zhao. Instead, he flew towards the 16th black-robed man. As long as he could defeat the last venerable, Zhuowen would undoubtedly become the first among the new students. The black-robed man did not intervene in the battle between Zhuowen and Yuan Zhao. He only stood silently at the end of the bridge. If anyone wanted to cross the bridge, he would intervene. Otherwise, he would not intervene. "Get down here," the black-robed person said in an indifferent voice. A claw extended from the empty space and suddenly grabbed down. Immediately, Zhuowen, who was relying on the speed of his dragon wings to go around the black-robed person, was held back by an invisible force. Whoosh! Zhuowen's figure appeared in the sky above the black-robed man. However, at this moment his expression was somewhat ugly. It seemed that the black-robed man would not let him pass so easily. "I think you should give up. You are not strong enough," the black-robed man said in an indifferent voice. With a wave of his right hand, Zhuowen flew backwards. Unknowingly, Yuan Zhao had appeared behind Zhuowen. He spat out a palm and was about to attack Zhuowen. However, Zhuowen was already prepared. He folded his dragon wings and enveloped his entire body, turning into an oval-shaped black egg. Bang! Yuan Zhao's palm landed on the dragon wings. Zhuowen fell from midair and landed heavily on the stone bridge, creating a deep pit that was several feet wide. "You want to pass the last venerable master with your strength? What a fool's dream. Since you don't want to get lost immediately, then you can die," Yuan Zhao said in an indifferent voice. He took a step in the air and charged forward in a strange manner. Ropes of Gang Qi were released from his body and filled the sky. They were like dragons and snakes that wrapped around Zhuowen. Zhuowen's expression changed slightly. His foot suddenly stomped on the ground, and his entire body shot backwards, leaving his original spot. However, that rope-like aura was like a maggot in one's bones as it shot out, and actually tightly wrapped around Zhuowen. What a strange Gang Qi. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed slightly. Yuan Zhao was indeed powerful. Just this move alone was enough to make Zhuowen somewhat exhausted. Whoosh! The dragon wings opened again and Zhuowen turned into a black shadow. In an instant, it was as if there were thousands of Zhuowens on the Thousand Beast Bridge. It was impossible to tell which one was real and which one was fake. Your speed is not bad. However, so what if you are fast? Under my inescapable net, even if your speed is unparalleled, you will not be able to escape. Yuan Zhao's indifferent voice rang out again. His right hand formed a palm and pressed down. Instantly, countless thread-like Gang Qi covered the entire Thousand Beast Bridge. No matter how fast Zhuowen was, he could not seal the entire bridge. It was still in Yuan Zhao's palm. Under the thread-like Gang Qi, Zhuowen's speed slowed down significantly. It was as if he had stopped moving. What a strange Gang Qi. It is like threads that have wrapped around my body and even hindered my movements. Zhuowen furrowed his brows and roared. A sea of blood gushed out and swept away the surrounding threads of Gang Qi like sharp blades. "It's too late!" A loud roar rang out. Then, Yuan Zhao appeared in front of Zhuowen. He threw out his right palm, and purple lightning flashed. Lightning in the palm. Zhuowen did not dare to be careless. The dragon claw formed by his right hand slammed upwards. The two palms collided, and countless gusts of wind blew. Zhuowen's expression changed drastically. The moment he came into contact with Yuan Zhao's palm, a terrifying amount of scorching energy came from his palm. Boom! Suddenly, the purple lightning energy exploded. Zhuowen's right hand was crushed by this terrifying purple lightning energy. Dragon blood splattered on the Thousand Beast Bridge. Thump thump thump. Zhuowen retreated dozens of steps. His right arm was trembling. At this moment, his dragon claw was almost crushed by the purple lightning energy. His dragon scales were flipped, and he looked extremely ferocious. At this moment, Yuan Zhao's long hair danced in the wind. Purple lightning surrounded his body. His eyes were filled with arrogance. He stared at Zhuowen and said indifferently, "An ant is an ant. Even if you have extraordinary combat strength, you are just a slightly stronger ant in my eyes." Zhuowen's eyes were dark. At the same time, he activated the vitality of the blood-soul tree core in his heart. Instantly, a huge amount of vitality energy spread throughout his body. The crushed dragon claw on his right hand was recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye. What a strong recovery ability. Yuan Zhao also noticed Zhuo Wen's rapidly recovering dragon claw, and a trace of astonishment appeared in his eyes. He did not expect Zhuo Wen's recovery ability to be so powerful. His claw, which had been shattered by the purple lightning energy, had recovered in the blink of an eye. However, so what if your recovery ability is strong? Under my attacks, how many times can you withstand? As Yuan Zhao spoke, he stomped his foot. Purple lightning filled the air and formed a purple lightning armor on his body. He looked indescribably majestic. Kill! Yuan Zhao shouted and dashed towards Zhuowen again. Purple lightning flashed and drew a beautiful purple light in the sky above the Thousand Beasts Bridge. In an instant, he was in front of Zhuowen. Zhuowen wasn't afraid at all. His fighting spirit soared to the sky. He had the vitality of the Blood Soul Tree's core. As long as it wasn't a fatal injury, he could recover in a short time. Although it wasn't as abnormal as the Undying Armor Soul, the effect wouldn't be too bad. Before the vitality of the Blood Soul Tree core was used up, it would be difficult to kill Zhuowen. Kill! Zhuowen roared and dashed out. With the help of the bone spurs on his body, he attacked Yuan Zhao continuously like a war machine. Boom! 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 The two of them instantly clashed. The energy in the air dissipated, and there were signs of space collapsing. It had to be said that Yuan Zhao's purple lightning was very terrifying. Every strike was able to shatter Zhuo Wen's body. However, Zhuo Wen's recovery ability was very strong. Relying on the vitality in his core, he was able to recover in time every time his body was shattered by the purple lightning. Yuan Zhao's brows furrowed even tighter. Zhuo Wen's recovery ability was a little beyond his expectations. The power of the purple lightning was terrifying enough. Zhuo Wen's body would recover in time every time it injured him. Why is Zhuo Wen's recovery ability so strong? Yuan Zhao slowly retreated and looked at Zhuo Wen cautiously. Zhuo Wen also retreated more than 10 steps. At this moment, his body was covered in wounds. However, with the vitality of the heart core, they were gradually healing. Soon he looked as good as new. Whoosh! Suddenly, a sharp sword light flashed. Then, Palm Tree came to Yuan Zhao's side with a long sword on his back. His eyes were filled with sharp sword light. Brother Yuan Zhao, you've been up here for so long, and you still haven't finished him off? Palm Tree suddenly mocked. Yuan Zhao narrowed his eyes and said indifferently, "This guy is insignificant. However, he's like a cockroach. His recovery ability is terrifying. If it wasn't for his recovery ability, he would have died thousands of times already." Hearing this, the corners of Pom Pom's mouth curled up slightly as he said, "Brother Yuan Zhao, although I can understand that you can't take down Zhuo Wen, isn't it a little far-fetched for you to use such a reason to justify yourself?" Yuan Zhao's eyes turned cold and said, "Since Brother Palm Tree is so confident, why don't you try and see if you can take down Zhuo Wen?" Palm Tree nodded and said, "Since Brother Yuan Zhao said so, I'll take this ant on." However, Zhuo Wen became colder and colder. Yuan Zhao and Palm Tree really thought that he was a persimmon that they could pinch as they wished. Whoosh! Pom Pom rushed over in an instant. His right hand formed a sword finger and pointed at Zhuo Wen. In an instant, countless sword lights flashed and rushed towards Zhuo Wen like a storm. Zhuo Wen stomped his foot and punched out with his right fist. A terrifying force was unleashed and slammed into the storm of swords. However, to Zhuo Wen's horror, the sword light storm was extremely terrifying. When his right fist hit it, it was as if he hit an indestructible rock wall. Thud thud thud. Zhuo Wen took a few steps back. Then, his fist shattered under the power of the sword light storm. Fortunately, Zhuo Wen had a strong life force and was able to heal his injuries in an instant. Boom boom boom. Zhuo Wen was like a madman as he threw out punch after punch. Every punch contained an earth-shattering power. His fists tore apart the sword light storm, and in the end, he forcefully shattered it into nothingness. Zhuo Wen's fists had also paid a huge price, as they were badly mangled. Chapter 995. 1 against 3-inch Brother Palm Tree. I didn't lie to you, did I? Yuan Zhao came to Palm Tree's side and glanced at Zhuo Wen with a faint smile. Palm Tree nodded and said, "Since that's the case, let's eliminate this ant first. I don't want to be the snipe in the clam, and let a brat become the fisherman. Brother Palm Tree, what you said is exactly what I was thinking. Those who are an eyesore should get out of here as soon as possible, Yuan Zhao replied. Let's attack together. We don't have much time now. Let's get this eyesore out of the Myriad Beasts Bridge as soon as possible. As Pom Pom spoke, countless sword chi enveloped her body. Sword light flashed in her eyes, making her look like a sharp sword that had been unsheathed. Yuan Zhao let out a long laugh. His body was also covered in purple lightning as he stared at Zhuowen wantonly. Zhuowen slowly raised his head, and his eyes were cold. The dragon scales on his body slowly faded away, and his originally dark golden eyes gradually turned blood red, containing a bloodthirsty light. A terrifying murderous demonic aura slowly flowed out of Zhuowen's body. Blood qi filled the air, and almost enveloped Zhuowen's entire body, causing Zhuowen's figure to become a little blurry. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. At this moment, more and more people gathered in the cave in front of the Myriad Beasts Bridge. In an instant, there were hundreds of people. After everyone understood the rules of the Myriad Beasts Bridge, they desperately climbed up the bridge and began to challenge the black-robed men, hoping to enter the top 500. Of course, everyone also noticed that at the end of the bridge, Yuan Zhao, Palm Tree, and Zhuowen were facing off against each other. It's Yuan Zhao and Palm Tree. They seem to be teaming up against one person? Everyone quickly noticed that Yuan Zhao and Palm Tree seemed to be teaming up. Then, everyone's gaze landed on the figure in front of Yuan Zhao and Palm Tree. This figure was enveloped in blood qi. Through the gaps in the bloody mist, everyone caught a glimpse of the figure's face. Soon after, they were stunned. This figure's face wasn't unfamiliar to them. Wasn't it the Supreme Being Genius, Zhuowen? It's that Zhuowen. Yuan Zhao and Pom Pom are planning to join forces to deal with that Zhuowen? If that's the case, then this Zhuowen is finished. Even if his battle prowess is monstrous, there's no way he'll be a match for Yuan Zhao and Pom Pom. Everyone who saw this scene looked at Zhuowen with a trace of pity in their eyes. They really didn't know what Zhuowen had done to provoke Yuan Zhao and Pom Pom to attack him together. Brother Yuan Zhao, Brother Palm Tree, the two of you seem to have forgotten about me. How could I miss out on this little bastard? A sinister voice sounded. Then Yin Zhongyang, dressed in a blue robe, had arrived at the end of the bridge and landed beside Yuan Zhao and Pom Pom. Brother Yun. Looks like you're not slow either. You actually broke through the top 15 black-robed people so quickly. However, I have to tell you that it won't be that easy for you to compete with us for the first place among the new students this time. Yuan Zhao glanced at Yin Zhongyang indifferently and said somewhat casually. Although Yin Zhongyang's cultivation was the same as Pom Pom's, he was also an early-stage heavenly venerable. Unfortunately, he wasn't an offensive-oriented sword cultivator like Pom Pom, so he didn't know that Yuan Zhao was afraid of him. Yin Zhongyang's expression froze, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. However, he quickly regained his composure and said, Brother Yuan Zhao, don't worry. It's really difficult for me to compete with you with my strength. However, I don't want to let this kid go. At this point, Yin Zhongyang's sinister gaze landed on Zhuowen. At this moment, Zhuowen was already showing signs of being possessed. Amidst the lingering blood qi, Zhuowen's hair was beginning to be dyed with a layer of blood. Wasn't this the demonic youth who had chopped off Yin Zhongyang's arm in the heavenly venerable Iron Man cave? It really is you. Today, I'll take revenge for what happened back then. Yin Zhongyang looked down at Zhuowen, who was shrouded in blood qi. His voice contained a trace of resentment. Zhuowen's gaze was calm as he said indifferently, Back in the heavenly venerable Iron Man cave, you fled in panic like a stray dog. Now, you want to use your master's power to bully me? Pom Pom and Yuan Zhao glanced at Zhuowen and Yin Zhongyang in surprise. It seemed that the two of them already had a grudge against each other. When they thought of Zhuowen's words, and the fact that Yin Zhongyang had rushed out of the heavenly venerable Iron Man cave with a severed arm, it was obvious that what Yin Zhongyang had said about the Blood Soul Tree's encounter was false. His severed arm probably had something to do with Zhuowen. If Yin Zhongyang's severed arm had really been chopped off by Zhuowen, then this kid really wasn't ordinary. Although Yin Zhongyang wasn't as strong as the two of them, the difference wasn't too great. His strength was far superior to that of an ordinary early-stage, heavenly venerable martialist, yet his arm had been chopped off by Zhuowen. Yuan Zhao and Pom Pom couldn't help but take another look at Zhuowen. Yin Zhongyang's expression darkened when he saw Zhuowen speak so bluntly. He sneered. You can only flaunt your sharp tongue during this period. Let's see if you can still be so stubborn later. Zhuowen's participation in this matter had completely stirred up the crowd below the Thousand Beast Bridge. Now that the three monstrous heavenly venerables had finally gathered together, it seemed like they were preparing to get rid of Zhuowen at the end of the bridge. When they thought of this possibility, everyone looked at Zhuowen with even more pity. Of all the people he could have provoked, he just had to provoke the three monstrous heavenly venerables. Wasn't he courting death? Big Brother Zhua. The three of them are so despicable. It's fine if their cultivation is higher than Big Brother Zhua's, but now the three of them are actually planning to join forces to get rid of Big Brother Zhua. How despicable. Jianan and Gatha had already arrived at the end of the Thousand Beast Bridge. When they saw the scene at the end of the bridge, they clenched their fists, and their eyes were filled with anger. Mo Lingtian had also arrived at the Supreme Being area at this moment. Naturally, he also saw the scene at the end of the bridge and frowned slightly. Clearly, he wasn't happy about the three monstrous heavenly venerables joining forces. Grand Lily followed behind Jianan and Gatha. Her beautiful eyes couldn't help but land on Zhuowen. For some reason, when she found out that this unfamiliar youth was also called Zhuowen, her heart became very complicated. She kept thinking of Zhuowen's figure in her mind. However, the Zhuowen in front of her was too different from the Zhuowen of the Qing Xian Empire. Whether it was his temperament or appearance, they were completely different. The two of them were just people with the same name. Of course, if Grand Lily knew that this Zhuowen was really that Zhuowen, her heart would probably be even more flustered. Attack! On the end of the bridge, Yuan Zhao suddenly shouted. The purple lightning around his body became even more vigorous. His entire body was bathed in the purple lightning, as if he was a god that had descended to the mortal world. Purple lightning fall. Pom Pom was like a sharp sword that had been unsheathed. His entire body was enveloped in a terrifying sword radiance. Sword shadows transformed around him, sharp and powerful. In the end, they transformed into a huge sword that was dozens of feet long. Sword shadows transform into sword. Lastly, Yin Zhongyang stomped his foot, and Yuan power surged out. It transformed into a terrifying ocean around him. On the surface of the ocean, layers of monstrous waves surged. On top of the monstrous waves, a terrifyingly huge blue whale surged out. Blue whale dive. In an instant, the three monstrous holy masters unleashed their powerful attacks at the same time. They swept towards Zhuowen, who was on the end of the bridge. The terrifying purple lightning, the huge sword that was surrounded by sword shadows, and the huge blue whale that was swimming in the ocean surged towards Zhuowen's head. They wanted to drown Zhuowen completely. Zhuowen is finished. The three monstrous holy masters are really joining forces to attack him. This is unbelievable. The entire Thousand Beasts Bridge fell silent. Everyone stared blankly at the three terrifying attacks that were like the might of the heavens. Their eyes were filled with awe. The power that the three attacks revealed was too terrifying. It made them want to prostrate themselves in admiration. Jianan and Gatha's faces turned pale. They could clearly feel how terrifying the three attacks were. Although Zhuowen had always been very powerful, the three monstrous holy masters were all extraordinary. The attacks that they unleashed were too terrifying. Boom! Finally, the three attacks landed at the end of the bridge. The young man that looked like a pine tree quietly stood at the end of the bridge. He raised his head slightly and stared at the three attacks that were like the might of the heavens. His eyes were filled with calmness. Demonization. First level of demonization. A faint voice rang out from Zhuowen's mouth. Soon after, the blood aura around him rose like steam. Zhuowen's eyes turned completely blood red. His black hair was dyed red. The aura of the demon of slaughter soared into the sky, forming a terrifying blood pillar. If you want to fight, I'll fight. Zhuowen roared. Demonic intent surged from his body. Even the entire Thousand Beasts Bridge trembled slightly under this demonic intent. It was as if it was about to yield to this powerful demonic intent. Boom! With a stomp of his foot, Zhuowen instantly shot out. Blood aura revolved around his hand, turning into a 3-foot-long blood spear. Zhuowen's blood spear slashed out horizontally. Countless blood shadows surged out and rushed towards the 3 terrifying attacks. Bang! 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 The blood shadows wreaked havoc, almost covering the entire sky above the Thousand Beasts Bridge. Terrifying blood clouds bloomed above Zhuowen, as if welcoming their demon king. Finally, the 3 attacks arrived in an instant and collided heavily with the blood shadows. Then a terrifying force spread out. The entire Thousand Beasts Bridge trembled once again. The other warriors on the bridge prostrated themselves on the ground, their faces filled with fear. This force was too terrifying. A strong sense of reverence and respect rose in their hearts. Yuan Zhao, Palm Tree, and Yin Zhongyang looked at Zhuowen with their brows furrowed. Yin Zhongyang was slightly better. After all, he had already seen the power of Zhuowen's demon of slaughter back in the Empyrean Iron Man cave. However, Yuan Zhao and Palm Tree were shocked. They didn't expect Zhuowen to have such a terrifying demonic power. The word demonic cultivator also popped up in their minds. Demonic cultivators were called demonic cultivators. Ordinary demonic cultivators willingly joined the demonic path in pursuit of greater power. This method of cultivation was very terrifying. If they weren't careful, they would become a mindless demon and lose themselves. Chapter 996. Breaking into the end of the bridge. He's actually a demonic cultivator. He's definitely a lunatic. Yuan Zhao narrowed his eyes. Any demonic cultivator had a resolute heart and an extreme insanity in their bones. As the saying goes, how can a demonic cultivator become a demonic cultivator if he isn't crazy? Break! 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 Zhuowen roared furiously as his blood-red hair fluttered in the wind. Demonic chi filled the sky as a blood spear continuously slashed out. Under the shroud of his blood aura, it formed a terrifying attack. Explosions rang out, following which, everyone on the Thousand Beasts Bridge was shocked to discover that under Zhuowen's frenzied slashes, the 3 terrifying attacks had actually stopped in midair. Some sharper cultivators even discovered that the 3 attacks that had stopped in midair were faintly showing signs of collapsing. Emosha! Zhuowen waved his right hand. Instantly, the blood spear in his hand split into 10 blood spears. Following which, the 10 blood spears flew out one after another, bombarding the surface of the 3 attacks one after another. The momentum was like a rainbow, each spear more terrifying than the last. Crack! Crisp cracking sounds rang out. Following which, everyone was shocked to discover that cracks had finally appeared on the 3 attacks. Furthermore, the cracks were getting bigger and bigger. In the end, the 10 blood spears pierced through the 3 attacks, causing them to completely collapse. It's broken? The entire Thousand Beasts Bridge fell into a strange silence. Everyone was dumbfounded as they stared at the 3 attacks that had been broken. There was an indescribable feeling in their hearts. These 3 attacks were the joint attacks of 3 monstrous Empyrean geniuses. If it were any other monstrous Empyrean geniuses who could break through these 3 attacks, the crowd wouldn't be too surprised. However, the one who broke through these 3 attacks was merely a supreme being. Zhuowen had undoubtedly created a miracle. Not only did he not fall under the joint attack of the 3 monstrous heavenly sovereigns, but he had also broken through their attacks. This fellow, Yuan Zhao and Yin Zhongyang took a few steps back as they stared in shock at the blood-red-haired, red-eyed youth that had soared into the sky. Don't hold back. Let's kill him together. Yuan Zhao was the first to regain his senses. With a cold snort, countless bolts of purple lightning gathered in his right hand and turned into a large spear that was surrounded by purple lightning. The purple lightning spear's aura was very powerful and wasn't any weaker than Zhuowen's divine sun cauldron. Obviously, it was also a superior royal spiritual treasure. Palm Master and Yin Zhongyang both nodded and took out their royal tier spirit treasures. With their talent and background, they naturally had royal tier spirit treasures. Yin Zhongyang still had the Neptune's halberd, while Palm Master had the long sword on her back. Kill! The 3 of them looked at each other and stepped out into the air, heading towards Zhuowen. They held their respective powerful spiritual treasures and surrounded Zhuo. Zhuo held the blood-red spear in his hand, and the bloodthirst in his eyes intensified. As he swung the blood-red spear, a terrifying demonic intent bloomed. Bang! 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 In an instant, the three heavenly sovereigns and Zhuo engaged in a fierce battle. Terrifying battle intent soared into the sky, and the sound of metal clashing could be heard. Zhuo swung his blood spear, but was suppressed by the three heavenly sovereigns. Although Zhuo's combat strength was terrifying, it was a pity that the three heavenly sovereigns each used their full strength to fight against Zhuo. Even Zhuo was suppressed. Boom! Suddenly, Yuan Zhao circled behind Zhuo and thrust the purple thunder great spear in his right hand at Zhuo's back. He wanted to pierce through Zhuo's entire body. Unfortunately, Zhuo's blood-red eyes focused, and he flicked the blood spear behind his back, knocking away Yuan Zhao's purple great spear. Do you really think I didn't hold back? Yuan Zhao sneered. His right palm struck out and landed on Zhuo's back. Terrifying origin energy invaded Zhuo's body, causing him to spit out a mouthful of blood. Palm Master and Yin Zhongyang took the opportunity to flank Zhuo from both sides. Palm Master swung her sword, and countless sword flowers bloomed, piercing through Zhuo. Yin Zhongyang, on the other hand, looked even more ferocious. He swung his Neptune's halberd, aiming for Zhuo's head. He wanted to kill Zhuo with one blow. Palm Master's attack wasn't a sure kill, but Yin Zhongyang had a sinister intention. He wanted to kill Zhuo once and for all. After reaching that line of thought, the chilliness in Zhuo's eyes grew. Stamping his foot, an even more terrifying demonic energy surged out. Next, Zhuo's blood-colored hair grew madly, reaching his waist. Second stage bedevilment. Monstrous demonic aura surged into the sky. Zhuo's blood-red eyes became even more profound. Rolling blood-red clouds descended from the sky and surrounded Zhuo's body. Then, the palm-shaped sword flower landed on the blood-red clouds, as if it had fallen into a swamp and froze in midair. At the same time, a terrifying aura surged out. Palm Master and Yuan Zhao were caught off guard and couldn't help but take a few steps back. Their eyes were filled with fear. Zhuo's devil chi had become much stronger. Yin Zhongyang's Neptune's halberd arrived just as expected. After stabbing into the blood-red clouds, he immediately sensed that something was amiss. He discovered that there was a strange suction force within the blood-red clouds that actually stopped his Neptune's halberd. This guy, Yin Zhongyang frowned. He wanted to pull out the sea god's halberd, but the suction force in the blood clouds was too strong. He couldn't pull it out at all. Since you want to kill me, I won't hold back. A cold voice sounded. Yin Zhongyang raised his head and saw Zhuo's strange blood eyes staring at him. Yin Zhongyang felt as if there was a knife on his back. I have to leave. Yin Zhongyang's heart pounded. He realized that Zhuo was much stronger than when he was in the Empyrean Iron Man cave. He was so strong that even Yin Zhongyang was afraid. Thinking of this, Yin Zhongyang didn't care about the sea god's halberd anymore. He let go of his right hand and stomped his foot, planning to retreat immediately. You want to leave now? It's too late. Zhuo's indifferent voice sounded. Zhuo stretched out his left hand and grabbed Yin Zhongyang's right arm. Then, the blood spear turned into a bloody light and swept through Yin Zhongyang's right arm, bringing with it a stream of blood. Poochie! Blood splattered everywhere. Yin Zhongyang howled in pain. His face was as pale as snow as he retreated. Zhuo had cut off his arm again. Damn it, this guy had cut off his arm again. You still want to leave? Do you think you can leave? Zhuo didn't hesitate to put the sea god's halberd into his spirit ring. Then he stomped his foot. Carrying endless demonic might, he instantly appeared in front of Yin Zhongyang and stomped his foot on Yin Zhongyang's chest. Poochie! Yin Zhongyang spat out a mouthful of blood. His blood boiled as Zhuo stomped on him. Then, Zhuo waved his blood spear again, cutting off Yin Zhongyang's remaining arm. Zhuo! How dare you cut off my arms? The Blue Whale Dynasty won't let you go. You're dead. Yin Zhongyang roared. He was filled with hatred. Last time, Zhuo had cut off his arm in the Empyrean Iron Man cave and trampled on him. After all, it was only him and Zhuo at that time. But now, he had joined forces with Yuan Zhao and Pom Pom. Moreover, in front of everyone, Zhuowen had cut off his arms and trampled on him. Yin Zhongyang had completely lost face. Pom, Yuan Zhao, what are you waiting for? Come over and take this little bastard away. I'm willing to pay any price if the two of you help me kill this little bastard. Yin Zhongyang suddenly roared at Yuan Zhao and Pom. Yuan Zhao and Pom looked at each other, as if they had reached some kind of agreement. Then with a stomp of their feet, they flew towards Zhuowen from two different directions. At this moment, Zhuowen was the biggest threat to them. They had no choice but to get rid of this guy first. This trash is for the two of you. Looking at Pom and Yuan Zhao, Zhuowen's eyes were filled with fear. These two weren't people he could compare to. One was an early-stage Empyrean sword cultivator, while the other was a middle-stage Empyrean sword cultivator. The two of them together were extremely difficult to deal with. What Zhuowen wanted now was to cross the Myriad Beasts Bridge first. As for these two, he could deal with them later. Thinking of this, Zhuowen raised his leg and kicked Yin Zhongyang. Blood spurted out of the latter's body, and his blood boiled. Like a human bomb, he flew towards Pom and Yuan Zhao. Yuan Zhao and Pom's eyes flickered. In the end, they decided to stop Yin Zhongyang. After all, Yin Zhongyang was the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty's crown prince. If he was killed in front of them, the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty's people would definitely go crazy. They might even go to the forces behind them to make trouble. Whoosh! At this moment, Zhuowen suddenly rushed towards the 16th black-robed man, bringing with him surging demonic might to crush him. Not good. Stop this guy. After stopping Yin Zhongyang, Yuan Zhao and Pom noticed Zhuowen's actions. Their expressions changed drastically as they rushed towards Zhuowen, hoping to stop Zhuowen. You won't make it in time. The corners of Zhuowen's mouth revealed a trace of an evil smile. Subsequently, he threw a palm forward, and a powerful demonic aura bloomed. The 16th black-robed man was barely able to endure for a while, before he directly collapsed. Zhuowen directly disappeared from the sight of the other two along the bridge. At the second stage of bedevilment, Zhuowen's combat strength was terrifying. Although the last black-robed man's cultivation had reached the peak heavenly venerable realm, due to many restrictions, his strength was much weaker than ordinary peak heavenly venerables. There was no way he could stop the second stage of bedevilment Zhuowen. When Yuan Zhao and Pom arrived at the end of the bridge, a new black-robed man had appeared. He stood in front of them, his eyes cold and merciless. Damn it! Get out of my way! Yuan Zhao's eyes were filled with rage, as he swung the purple lightning spear in his hand. Instantly, the surroundings turned into a world of purple lightning. Even Pom Deva, who was beside him, was forced to take a few steps back. Her eyes were filled with shock. The black-robed man was not to be outdone. He struck out with his palm, creating countless palm prints. However, under the power of the purple lightning world, these palm prints were as fragile as paper. Die! The thousands of palm prints were forced back. Yuan Zhao's purple lightning spear pierced through the black-robed man's body. Then the black-robed man was annihilated. Yuan Zhao disappeared from the end of the bridge and chased after Zhuowen. He could not let that brat Zhuowen become the #1 freshman. Otherwise he would lose face. Chapter 997. Sea of Magma. The moment Yuan Zhao left, the entire Myriad Beast Bridge fell into a strange silence. In this silent environment, Yin Zhongyang's heart-wrenching screams continued to ring out. At this moment, Yin Zhongyang's arms were broken, and he was barely able to sit cross-legged on the ground. His face was pale, and his eyes were filled with hatred. Hissing sounds could be heard from his mouth from time to time. On the Myriad Beast Bridge, after confirming that the scene at the end of the bridge wasn't an illusion, the crowd finally boiled over. Not only was Zhuowen not killed by the encirclement of 3 monstrous heavenly venerables, but he had also broken Yin Zhongyang's arms and successfully broken out of the encirclement. This result exceeded everyone's expectations. When everyone finally believed this fact, there was only one thought in their minds. Was that young man called Zhuowen even human? He was much more monstrous than the 3 monstrous heavenly venerables. Big brother Zhuowen is amazing. Jianan and Gatha were also excited. Clearly, They were happy from the bottom of their hearts that Zhuowen had broken free. No wonder even the dean invited Zhuowen to the outer court. "This guy is too monstrous," muttered Mo Lingtian in a low voice, unable to calm down. "Brother Yun, since we're not fated to be first place, let's just leave the Myriad Beast Bridge." Palm Tree suddenly stood up and smiled at Yin Zhongyang. Yin Zhongyang's eyes flickered. Even Palm Tree didn't plan on fighting for first place, let alone him. "Let's go." Yin Zhongyang suppressed his injuries and said coldly. Palm Tree nodded and stared at the last black-robed man. "Send the two of us out of the grotto." The black-robed man nodded and waved his sleeve. Palm Tree and Yin Zhongyang were immediately wrapped in a ball of black light and disappeared from the end of the Myriad Beast Bridge. After Palm Tree and Yin Zhongyang left, many cultivators who arrived at the Myriad Beast Bridge also left one after another. After all, they weren't Zhuowen and the three monstrous heavenly venerables who could reach the area where the black-robed heavenly venerables were. The Myriad Beast Bridge only allowed the first 500 people to enter, so most of the cultivators who came later were rejected outside the bridge and directly sent out of the Myriad Beast Grotto. Whoosh! Whoosh! At this moment, the end of the Myriad Beasts Bridge led to a deep tunnel. This tunnel was like the body of a python, twisting and turning. It looked extremely strange. Rows of torches were placed on both sides of the tunnel, illuminating the dark tunnel with incomparable brightness. Two figures flashed through the passageway in an instant. One of them was fleeing while the other was chasing. Their speed was extremely fast. The one in front was a young man with blood-red hair that reached his waist. Behind him was a young man with a purple lightning spear. His entire body was filled with strange purple lightning. The two of them, one chasing and the other fleeing, quickly shuttled through the passageway, maintaining a distance of 100 meters between them. "This Yuan Zhao is really persistent. He's actually still following behind me." Sensing the powerful aura behind him, Zhuowen's eyes narrowed as he coldly muttered. Now Zhuowen did not want to clash with Yuan Zhao. What he needed to do now was to obtain the first-ranked jade plate. He had heard from the black-robed man on the stone bridge that the first-ranked jade plate was at the other end of the bridge. The other rankings were determined by the black-robed man, so there was no need to compete. "Zhuowen, weren't you very powerful just now? Why are you running away like a stray dog now?" Yuan Zhao's voice came from behind, but Zhuowen did not care at all. At this moment, Zhuowen's attention was all on the surrounding environment. At the same time, his mind power surged out, wanting to investigate the surroundings of the tunnel. "Xiaohei, did you find anything?" Zhuowen suddenly transmitted his voice. "Continue forward. This tunnel is very deep, and I suspect that this tunnel could lead directly to the outside of the grotto. Moreover, this tunnel should be specially designed for those geniuses who have the ability to cross the Myriad Beasts Bridge." Xiaohei replied. Hearing this, Zhuowen stomped his foot and instantly increased his speed. Yuan Zhao was like a fly behind Zhuowen, which annoyed Zhuowen immensely. There's an ancient hall up ahead. Kid, perhaps the jade token is in that hall." Xiaohei suddenly said. A glint flashed across Zhuowen's eyes when he heard this. He stomped his foot, and his speed increased a little. Around 20 breaths later, Zhuowen finally walked out of the tunnel and arrived at the ancient hall that Xiaohei had mentioned. The hall that appeared in front of Zhuowen was not very big. The surface was covered with cracks like a spider web, and an ancient and vicissitude aura spread out. In the center of the ancient hall, there was a 10 feet tall stone table. Above the stone table floated a sparkling and translucent jade tablet. In the center of the jade tablet, there was an indescribable rune drawn on it. Zhuowen could feel that the rune drawn on the jade tablet was different. As for why it was different, Zhuowen couldn't say. "It should be this jade token," Zhuowen muttered softly. He extended his right hand and took the jade token in his hand. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. A strange sound rang out, causing Zhuowen to squint his eyes. This was because he realized that the demonic symbol inscribed on his right cheek was actually throbbing. However, this throbbing did not last for long and instantly calmed down. This jade token actually caused the demonic symbol on my cheek to move. What exactly is this thing? Zhuowen whispered in surprise. Swoosh. Suddenly, the sound of something breaking through the air rang out behind Zhuowen. Soon after, Yuan Zhao had finally arrived at the center of the hall. As soon as Yuan Zhao entered, his gaze immediately focused on the jade token in Zhuowen's hand. He said coldly, "Hand it over and I'll spare your life." Zhuowen calmly glanced at Yuan Zhao. Soon after, he very naturally placed the jade token into his spirit ring. This action caused Yuan Zhao's gaze to darken. "You're courting death," Yuan Zhao roared. He lifted the purple thunder spear in his hand and stepped into the air. Instantly he shot towards Zhuowen. Countless bolts of purple lightning surged out and enveloped Zhuowen's entire body. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes. He stepped into the air and swung his blood spear. Countless blood shadows surged out and collided with the purple lightning. Instantly the two of them exploded. Yuan Zhao and Zhuowen both took dozens of steps back. This Yuan Zhao is even stronger than before. Looks like he didn't use his full strength when he surrounded me earlier. Zhuowen stepped on the ground and looked at Yuan Zhao in front of him with a chilling gaze. Yuan Zhao also stopped more than 10 meters away and stared at Zhuowen, who had a head full of blood hair. After entering the second level of the bedevilment state, Zhuowen's battle strength was much more terrifying than an ordinary heavenly sovereign. Even Yuan Zhao was starting to be wary of this kid. "The jade token belongs to me. You don't have the right to have it." Yuan Zhao roared angrily and formed a seal with his hands. Suddenly, violent bolts of purple lightning surged out of his spear and condensed into a gigantic purple thunder qilin above him. Qilin lightning. As soon as the purple thunder qilin condensed, its 4 thick hooves began to stomp on the air. It quickly swept towards Zhuowen, wanting to completely drown Zhuowen. Zhuowen's gaze was solemn. The fire rune on the back of his right hand shone with a terrifying light. Then, terrifying magma gushed out from the back of his hand. More and more magma gushed out and finally formed a boundless sea of magma above Zhuowen. This sea of magma was something that Zhuowen had absorbed from the world of magma. Now it finally came in handy. What a terrifying magma! Yuan Zhao's eyes narrowed. He could also feel the terror of the sea of magma that suddenly appeared above Zhuowen. Sizzle! 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 The temperature of the sea of magma was too terrifying. The surface of the ancient hall was covered in rubble. Moreover, the gravity in the sea of magma was extremely terrifying. It was dozens of times stronger than the outside world. Even Yuan Zhao felt a strong pressure on his body, causing his movements to be somewhat sluggish. Roar! The purple thunder qilin rushed over. However, due to the terrifying gravity, it lost its balance and almost fell into the sea of magma. Fortunately, Yuan Zhao used his mind to control the purple thunder qilin. Otherwise, it would have been a tragedy. "It's useless. Magma sea, roll over for me." Zhuowen sneered and waved his right hand. Suddenly, the sea of magma began to surge with terrifying waves of magma. At the same time, countless magma fire pythons opened their cold triangular eyes and rushed towards the purple thunder qilin. In an instant, they surrounded the purple thunder qilin. "Owa!" The purple thunder qilin let out a sorrowful cry. It tried to break free from the fire pythons in waves, but to no avail. "Annihilation!" Zhuowen spat out these 2 words. The sea of magma surged and the huge purple thunder qilin was instantly swallowed by the waves of magma. Yuan Zhao's face turned pale. He had not expected Zhuowen to have such a terrifying move. The sea of magma was too terrifying. It was like the might of the heavens, causing his heart to tremble. "It's your turn now." Turning his head slightly, Zhuowen's cold gaze landed on Yuan Zhao. The latter's hair stood on end. With the sea of magma, it was impossible for him to get any closer to Zhuowen. "Let's go," Yuan Zhao said decisively. He knew that with the sea of magma, Zhuowen's victory was already decided. He was afraid that he would not be able to compete with Zhuowen. The best thing to do now was to leave. "Leave? Do you think you can leave?" Zhuowen said indifferently. With a wave of his right hand, the sea of magma in the sky suddenly swept towards Yuan Zhao, wanting to bury him. Yuan Zhao's face changed drastically. He quickly rushed towards the other exit of the ancient hall. The sea of magma was too terrifying. It was not Zhuowen's power but the power of nature. Whoosh! Yuan Zhao dived into the tunnel that represented the exit. The sea of magma chased after him and swallowed the tunnel in an instant. Zhuowen followed behind the sea of magma leisurely. Yuan Zhao's fate was already decided. He was not worried at all. At the top of the 10,000 Beasts Grotto, pillars of light shot up into the sky. Then, silhouettes walked out one after another. These silhouettes were all cultivators that were sent out from the 10,000 Beasts Grotto. Most of them were eliminated. After all, only 500 cultivators had entered the 10,000 Beasts Grotto. The remaining 6,000 plus cultivators did not have the qualifications to advance. Chapter 998. Number 10. After the dean arranged for the 6,000 eliminated cultivators to stand outside the valley, his gaze landed on the giant beast head in front of the stage. He knew that the main event would be the remaining 500 people. These 500 people were the key geniuses this time, and they were the elites among the elites that could enter the outer court. Not only the dean, but the 4 old men standing behind him, Hu Jia, Cheng Dong, Qi Ji, and the dozen Emperor Realm experts all had their gazes focused on the beast head. They were also looking forward to the remaining 500 spots. Of course, compared to the 500 spots, what they were looking forward to the most was who would take first place this time. Haha! Cheng Dong, prepare your 9 twist treasure pill. This time, the title of newcomer king will belong to Yuan Zhao. Qi Ji suddenly stared at Cheng Dong with provocation as he teased. Cheng Dong's gaze was a little gloomy as he indifferently said, "The results aren't out yet, so why are you so anxious?" Although Yuan Zhao is strong, he might not be able to take first place this time. Continue to be stubborn. In any case, I've already reserved your 9 twist treasure pill. That thing will be mine sooner or later. The corner of Qi Ji's mouth rose as he chuckled. Cheng Dong no longer paid attention to Qi Ji, as he nervously stared at the exit of the 1,000 Beasts Grotto. In fact, he also had a trace of hope in his heart, hoping that Zhuowen could create a miracle. However, reason told him that the miracle he was hoping for was just an illusory fantasy. Zhuowen was only at the late stage of the Sovereign Realm, while the Heavenly Sovereign Realm was at the middle stage of the Sovereign Realm. The difference between their realms was too great, so it was a little difficult for Zhuowen to compete with Yuan Zhao. Not to mention Yuan Zhao, the other 2 monstrous Empyrean geniuses, Pom Pom and Yin Zhongyang, were probably enough to make Zhuowen suffer. Thus, Cheng Dong did not have much hope in his heart. Whoosh! Numerous sonic booms resounded. Soon after, numerous figures appeared at the beast head exit of the 1,000 Beasts Grotto. When these figures arrived at the exit, they narrowed their eyes. Only after adapting to the strong light outside did they finally see the dean and the others on the platform in front of them. Haha! Congratulations to all of you for successfully entering the top 500. You are now students of the Outer Court. Welcome to the Outer Court of Fine God Institute. On the platform, the dean said gently to the few figures that had appeared with a smile on his face. Before these cultivators could react, they were stunned when they heard the dean's words. Soon after, they revealed looks of ecstasy as they hurriedly cupped their hands and said respectfully, "Thank you, Dean." The dean nodded. With a wave of his sleeve, he instructed the few people to wait patiently at the side of the station. The strength of these warriors was not very high. They were basically around the Xuanzuan realm. They should be at the bottom of the top 500. The people on the stage just glanced at them and no longer paid attention to them. Whether it was Qi Ji and the other martial emperors, they only had to pay attention to the 3 heavenly venerate monsters and the remaining golden venerate monsters. The rest of the cultivators really couldn't catch their attention. It seems that our Alcade Sacred Dynasty will get 3 spots in the top 10 freshmen this time. Haha, of course, the first place will also belong to our Alcade Sacred Dynasty. Supreme Jin suddenly burst into laughter. His voice was filled with insolence. Supreme Jin's insolence immediately caused the other martial emperors around him to frown. However, no one said anything. Supreme Jin was the strongest among the martial emperors. His cultivation had reached the 3rd level martial emperor realm, and he was considered a peak low-level martial emperor. Moreover, he was backed by the Alcade Sacred Dynasty, which had the deepest foundation among the 4 sacred dynasties. Not many people dared to criticize Supreme Jin to his face. Moreover, the Alcate Sacred Dynasty was indeed full of talents. Not only did they have a terrifying monster like Yuan Zhao, but the second prince, Yuan Kong, and the third prince, Yuan Sheng, were also extremely talented. The three of them had a great chance of entering the top 10 freshmen this time. Supreme Jin, you're wrong. The first place of the freshmen isn't determined by who is the strongest. After all, it also depends on the comprehensive evaluation of talent and potential. Don't be too full of yourself. Otherwise you'll suffer a painful fall, Supreme Lan said sarcastically. Supreme Jin's eyes were cold as he stared at Supreme Lan and said, Supreme Lan, do you still think that your Blue Whale Sacred Dynasty's Yin Zhongyang can compete with Yuan Zhao? At most, he'll be in the top 3. As for the first place, forget it. Among the 3, Pom Pom is stronger than him. Supreme Lan's expression changed slightly. He snorted coldly and said, the first place of the freshmen is full of unknowns. You're too full of yourself. I don't know if it's full or not. I only know that Yuan Zhao will definitely be the first place of the freshmen. His strength is obvious to all. Whoever dares to compete with him will be courting death, Supreme Jin said domineeringly. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. As time passed, more and more cultivators came out of the exit. Among them, the siblings Jia Nan and Gatha successfully entered the top 500. Even Xian Xing from the Yin Xian Empire was among them. Looking at the cultivators coming out one after another, some of the Emperor Realm experts on the stage were happy while others were sad. Among them, the Yin Emperor was quite happy. He didn't expect Xian Xing to enter the top 500. Although Mo Lingtian and Zhuowen hadn't come out yet, he believed that with Mo Lingtian and Zhuowen's talents, it wouldn't be a problem for them to enter the top 500. Moreover, their ranking wouldn't be too low. As for the Qing Emperor, his mood wasn't as good as the Yin Emperor's. This was because their Qing Xian Empire only had Grand Lily left. If Grand Lily didn't enter the top 500, then their Qing Xian Empire's geniuses wouldn't be able to enter the Jiaxin Institute. In fact, their Qing Xian Empire originally had many geniuses. The first prince, Huangfu Wudao, Grand Lily, and Zhuowen had a high chance of entering the outer courtyard. Unfortunately, Huangfu Wudao had been killed by Zhuowen. If he was still alive, Huangfu Wudao's cultivation would probably have reached the supremacy realm. After all, Grand Lily's cultivation had reached the late stage of the mystique venerable realm. Huangfu Wudao's talent was much more terrifying than Grand Lily's. In addition, the Qing Emperor focused on nurturing him. Huangfu Wudao's progress would only be more terrifying. Thinking of Zhuowen, the Qing Emperor's gaze became extremely gloomy. It was because of this insignificant ant that the Qing Emperor had suffered a great loss last time. That little bastard escaped pretty quickly the last time. However, now that he has entered the spatial crack, he is still dead for sure, the Azure Emperor muttered softly. When he thought of Zhuo Wen's fate, his expression became slightly better. Whoosh! Another figure flew out from the exit. It was a beautiful figure with a graceful figure and a delicate face. The Qing Emperor looked at the beautiful figure, and a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. This lady was Grand Lily. Under the dean's instructions, Grand Lily also came to the other side of the open space and silently waited for the other geniuses. At the same time, her beautiful eyes were also looking at the other cultivators on the open space, as if she was searching for a certain figure. Still not out yet. After searching for a while, Grand Lily's beautiful eyes became slightly gloomy when she did not find the figure she was looking for. She could not help but pay attention to the young man who had the same name as Zhuowen. The terrifying battle that had happened at the end of the Thousand Beasts Bridge was still vivid in her mind. Zhuowen had fought against the three monstrous heavenly venerables. Not only had he broken through the encirclement, but he had also cut off both of Yin Zhongyang's arms. What made Grand Lily frown even more was that the young man called Zhuowen had used various techniques that were extremely similar to Zhuowen from the Qing Xian Empire. His bedevilment power was too similar. They had the same name, and were both experts in spear techniques. Even their techniques were extremely similar. All these made Grand Lily associate Zhuowen from the Qing Xian Empire with Zhuowen. It was precisely because of the random thoughts in her mind that Grand Lily's heart was in a mess. She even began to suspect that Zhuowen was the same Zhuowen from the Qing Xian Empire. There are only 11 people left. It should be time for the top 10 to come out, the dean suddenly said calmly. Everyone in the station stared at the exit with flickering eyes. They did not care about the other rankings, but they were extremely excited to see the top 10. Whoosh! 2 more ear-piercing sounds rang out. Then, they saw Yuanxing from the Alcate Sacred Dynasty and Emo Lingtian from the Yin Xian Empire appear at the exit at the same time. Yuanxing's expression was a little ugly. He glared fiercely at Emo Lingtian, as if he was going to eat him alive. Emo Lingtian's lips curled into a faint smile. He ignored Yuanxing's unfriendly gaze and slowly walked out of the exit. Haha. Yuanxing, did you get the top 10 jade tokens? Supreme Jean spoke before the dean could speak. At this moment, Supreme Jean stared at Yuanxing with a burning gaze. He completely ignored Emo Lingtian, who was next to him. Emo Lingtian was only at the peak of the refined state. Supreme Jean did not care about him at all. He could not possibly win against Yuanxing. Yuanxing's expression froze. He then said in a low muffled voice, Uncle, Yuanxing is untalented, and has only managed to get the 11th jade token. As he spoke, Yuanxing flashed the jade token in his hand. The word 11 was carved on it. The smile on Supreme Jin's face faded as he nodded. That's not bad. It's good that you've managed to get the 11th position. The dean did not reprimand Supreme Jin for his interruption. Instead, he turned to Yuanxing and said, You should meet up with the rest over there. Yuanxing nodded. He then glared fiercely at Emo Lingtian once again before he headed to an empty space on the side. You have the 10th jade token with you, don't you? The dean smiled gently at Emo Lingtian. Emo Lingtian nodded and produced a jade token from his hand. The word 10 was written on the jade token. Congratulations, you've managed to get into the top 10. You now have the right to ascend the platform. The dean's smile grew even more radiant as he spoke to Emo Lingtian. Emo Lingtian was taken aback. However, he did not reject the dean's invitation and ascended the platform, enjoying the gazes of the other cultivators in the empty space. The first new disciple to enter the top 10 had finally emerged. However, the person who had appeared had greatly exceeded everyone's expectations. He was only a cultivator at the peak of the refined state. Furthermore, this person was not a genius from the 4 great sacred empires or the 3 great sects. Yuanxing's expression was ugly. He was extremely displeased with the fact that Emo Lingtian had ascended the platform, while he could only stand in the empty space with the other cultivators. Back then, he had fought with Emo Lingtian for the 10th jade token at the 10,000 Beasts Bridge. Unfortunately, Emo Lingtian's battle prowess was not to be underestimated. Furthermore, his purple net flame was abnormally terrifying. In the end, Yuanxing had suffered a hidden loss at the hands of Emo Lingtian. His jade token had been snatched away by Emo Lingtian. Hence, the moment he stepped out, his gaze towards Emo Lingtian was extremely unfriendly. Chapter 999. Number 1 Yan Di smiled excitedly. Although he knew that Mo Lingtian's ranking wouldn't be low, he didn't expect him to be so hardworking and get 10th place. This was really a pleasant surprise. Who said the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty would get 3 spots in the top 10? Emperor Lan sneered. Hearing this, Supreme Jin's eyes turned extremely gloomy, and he replied indifferently, Supreme Jin, you've said enough today. You can shut your mouth now. This was merely an accident. Anyway, Yuan Zhao will definitely take first place among the new students this time. Supreme Emperor Lan's face stiffened slightly as he glanced at Supreme Emperor Jin with some fear. He did not say another word. Supreme Emperor Jin was stronger than him, as he was a 3rd-level martial emperor. If he angered this guy, he would not have a good ending. Now that Yuanxing was ranked 11th, he had already ruthlessly humiliated Supreme Jin. Supreme Lan knew when to stop, so he did not say anything else. Whoosh! Whoosh! Another 3 figures flew out from the exit. Looking at the 3 figures, the Emperor Realm experts from the Burning Flame Holy Dynasty, the Divine Arm Holy Dynasty, and the Yellow Mystery Sect heaved a sigh of relief. A rare smile appeared on their solemn faces. They were the Burning Flame Holy Dynasty's Fenji, the Divine Arm Holy Dynasty's Yuan Tong, and the Yellow Mystic Sect's Huangxian. Yuan Tong ranked 9th, Fenji ranked 8th, and the Yellow Mystic Sect's Huangxian ranked 7th. Under countless envious gazes, the three of them also ascended the stage and enjoyed the gazes of the other geniuses. This was a privilege and glory that only belonged to the top 10 new students. After the three of them stepped onto the platform, they first looked at Mo Lingtian strangely, then looked at Yuanxing, who was standing in the open space below. Their faces revealed a trace of contemplation. Yuanxing didn't make it into the top 10. Instead, it was an unfamiliar cultivator, at the peak of the Supreme Being realm, that obtained the 10th place. This naturally surprised the three of them. Yuanxing felt his cheeks burning. To think that he, who was at the middle stage of the Golden Venerate realm, could not win against an unknown peak Supreme Being. It could be said that this was a huge slap to his face. The four geniuses on the stage naturally didn't know what Yuanxing was thinking. Even if they knew, they wouldn't care too much. Since Yuanxing had no chance to enter the top 10 freshmen, there was a certain gap between them and him. No one would care too much about the weak. Now 4 out of the top 10 freshmen had already been occupied. There were only 6 left. Therefore, the anticipation in the eyes of the people standing on the stage became even more intense. Many people even began to discuss who would be the first among the freshmen this time. The top 3 positions of this year's freshmen should be divided between the 3 Empyrean monsters. That might not be the case. Have all of you forgotten that Exalted Realm Junior called Zhuowen? This is a ruthless person who defeated both Yuanxing and Sky Origin. This child might also enter the top 3. What do you know? Sky Origin is only at the peak of the Golden Venerate realm. There's a big gap between him and the early stage of the Empyrean realm. If Yin Zhongyang makes a move, he can also crush Sky Origin. It's unlikely that Zhuowen will be able to compete with the 3 Empyrean monsters. Whoosh! Whoosh! Another 2 figures flew out. Everyone's eyes focused on them. A blue-robed youth with a warm smile on his face, and a golden-robed youth with sharp eyes flew out of the exit at the same time, and appeared before everyone's eyes. It's Blue Smoke from the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty and Sky Origin from the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty. I wonder what kind of jade tokens they obtained. Some people in the crowd immediately recognized the 2 figures, and whispered among themselves. Show us your jade tokens. The dean smiled faintly. Lan Yin and Sky Origin nodded, and both of them took out their respective jade plates. The jade plate in Lan Yin's hand had the number 6 lit up, while the jade plate in Sky Origin's hand had the number 5. Clearly, Lan Yin was ranked 6th, and Sky Origin was ranked 5th. After showing their jade tokens, the 2 silently walked up the platform. Supreme Jean, who was originally gloomy, looked slightly better when he saw Sky Origin obtain the 5th jade token. Not long after Blue Smoke and Sky Origin came out, another beautiful figure appeared at the exit. This beautiful figure was dressed in light muslin, and her voluptuous figure was faintly discernible. Her entire person was like the bright moonlight in the night sky. The Emperor Realm expert of the Cold Moon Palace looked at this beautiful figure with a bright smile on his face. Needless to say, this beautiful figure was the genius of the Cold Moon Palace, Shi Quebec. However, Shi Ke was ranked 4th. This result was beyond the expectations of many people. Shi Ke from the Cold Moon Palace had always kept a low profile. Although he was a genius from the Cold Moon Palace, one of the 3 major sects, he was not as arrogant as the other geniuses. This caused many people to have no impression of Shi Quebec. However, now that she was ranked 4th among the new students, everyone began to pay attention to this quiet girl. Your Cold Moon Palace is really low-key. Shi Ke has been hiding her strength all this time, right? She only revealed her trump card in the last round and obtained the 4th ranking, right? Supreme Jean frowned slightly and said to the Emperor Realm expert of the Cold Moon Palace. Supreme Jean, you're too polite. Shi Ke has indeed hidden her strength before. However, compared to the eldest prince of the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty, Yuan Zhao, she is still too weak. the Emperor Realm expert of the Cold Moon Palace said politely. When Supreme Jin heard this, he nodded, and a pleased expression appeared on his face. Since the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty had Yuan Zhao, the first ranking among the new disciples would definitely fall on Yuan Zhao. Only the top 3 are left. If I'm not wrong, the top 3 should be Yuan Zhao, Palm Deity, and Yin Zhongyang. The first place will definitely be Yuan Zhao. As for the second and third place, it will be decided between Palm Deity and Yin Zhongyang. As soon as Supreme Jin's voice fell, another 2 figures flew out from the beast's head. The moment these 2 figures appeared in front of everyone, the entire station fell silent. The 2 people who had appeared were naturally Palm Deity, from the Myriad Sword Sect, and Yin Zhongyang, from the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty. As for why everyone suddenly fell silent, it was because the 2 people who had appeared were not in good condition. Palm Deity was in a better condition. Although he was a little battered and travel-worn, there was nothing special about him. However, Yin Zhongyang's condition attracted everyone's attention. This was because Yin Zhongyang's arms were empty. His arms had been cut off by someone. He looked extremely strange and miserable. At this moment, Yin Zhongyang also noticed the many gazes that were directed at him from around the station. His face immediately turned extremely gloomy. He had already expected the different reactions from the people after he had appeared. However, when he personally saw the strange gazes directed at him, Yin Zhongyang still felt humiliated. His anger towards Zhuowen had reached its peak. Yin Zhongyang's arms were cut off? Who did this? Many people were puzzled. Supreme Jin was stunned at first. Then his eyes flashed with rage. He took a step forward and came to Yin Zhongyang's side. He placed his right hand on Yin Zhongyang's back, and a surge of origin energy rushed into Yin Zhongyang's body. Then, he took out many precious spiritual herbs from his spiritual ring. His origin energy turned into a origin energy fire, and boiled the spiritual herbs into a medicinal liquid. Then, he spread it all over Yin Zhongyang's arms. Then a miraculous scene appeared. Yin Zhongyang let out a painful roar. Then, new arms began to slowly grow out from his severed arms. Thank you, Supreme Jin. Yin Zhongyang cupped his hands and thanked Supreme Jin gratefully. From the way Yin Zhongyang addressed Supreme Jin, it was obvious that Supreme Jin was a general of the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty. If a general had the strength of an emperor, it seemed that the strength of these holy dynasties was unfathomable. Supreme Jin waved his hand. Then he asked with a sinister look, Crown Prince, who was so vicious to cut off your arms? Was it Yuan Zhao of the Alcade Holy Dynasty? Before Yin Zhongyang could speak, Supreme Jin had already walked over and said indifferently, Supreme Jin, are you not convinced? Yin Zhongyang was not strong enough. He deserved to have his arms cut off by Yuan Zhao. Obviously, Supreme Jin also believed that Yuan Zhao had cut off Yin Zhongyang's arms. Instead, he was proud of it. After all, Yin Zhongyang was also a heavenly venerable. But Yuan Zhao had cut off his arms. Unknowingly, Yuan Zhao's strength was far greater than Yin Zhongyang's. Yuan Zhao didn't cut off Yin Zhongyang's arms. They were Zhuowen's doing. Palm Master suddenly spoke calmly. Then, she took out the second jade token and stepped onto the platform. Since Palm Master was ranked second, Yin Zhongyang was naturally ranked third. Therefore, there was only one spot left for first place. Zhuowen cut off his arms? Who's Zhuowen? Supreme Jin and Supreme Lan were stunned at first. Their eyes were filled with confusion. They really didn't know who Zhuowen was. It's the young man who broke through the heavenly venerable Iron Man cave as a supreme being. Yin Zhongyang said viciously, and stepped onto the platform. Having his arms cut off was not something to be proud of. If he had lost his arms while being surrounded by 3 heavenly venerable evildoers, Zhuowen, it would be a disgrace. Yin Zhongyang couldn't open his mouth, and could only say something ambiguous. Oh, it's that guy. Supreme Lan and Supreme Jin looked at each other, and remembered the young man, who had rushed out from the heavenly venerable Iron Man cave. If a supreme being ant can injure you to this extent, it seems that the Blue Whale Holy Court's Crown Prince is nothing more than that. Supreme Jin's eyes flickered as he spoke coldly. Yin Zhongyang's eyes were cold and gloomy as he replied indifferently. Is that so? The only spot left should be decided between Zhuowen and Yuan Zhao. because only the two of them have managed to break through the 10,000 Beasts Bridge and reach the other side. Do you really think that Zhuowen is an ordinary Supreme Being? Supreme Jin scoffed icily. The Supreme Being stage is still the Supreme Being stage. There's a huge gap between the Supreme Being stage and the Heavenly Venerable stage. Do you really think that Zhuowen is a match for Yuan Zhao? Yin Zhongyang did not say anything else. He knew that Supreme Jin would not believe his words. After all, Zhuowen's battle power was indeed shocking. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, he would not have believed it either. Oh, two people have made it to the other side of the 10,000 Beasts Bridge this time? It seems that one of the two geniuses will be eliminated in the end. After all, there's only one jade token on the other side of the 10,000 Beasts Bridge, and that jade token represents the champion of this year's new batch, the dean said in astonishment. Everyone else nodded. It seems that one of the two remaining geniuses, Zhuowen and Yuan Zhao, will be eliminated in the end. However, no one knows who will be eliminated, and who will be the champion and receive the supreme honor. Whoosh! Just as everyone was speculating, a figure suddenly shot out from the beast's head, attracting everyone's attention. When they saw the figure, everyone was stunned for a moment, before a look of understanding appeared on their faces. Supreme Jin's tightly knitted brows finally relaxed. This was because the figure that had rushed out was none other than Yuan Zhao. It seems that Yuan Zhao will be the champion of this year's new batch. The crowd muttered to themselves. Chapter 1000. The true number 1. When Yuan Zhao finally appeared from the beast's head exit, everyone on the platform knew that there was no doubt about who would become the number 1 new student. When Zhuowen and Yuan Zhao crossed the 1,000 Beasts Bridge one after another, everyone had already guessed that the number 1 new student would definitely be decided between Zhuowen and Yuan Zhao. Now, Yuan Zhao was the first to appear from the beast's head exit, while Zhuowen was nowhere to be seen. This was enough to prove that the number 1 jade token was definitely obtained by Yuan Zhao, and that Zhuowen should have met with misfortune in the fight with Yuan Zhao. It was even possible that he might have directly died. What a pity! Back then, Zhuowen's performance in the second round was so eye-catching that even the dean personally invited him to enter the outer court. This kind of treatment is not something that anyone can obtain. Unfortunately, that Zhuowen thought highly of himself and rejected the dean's invitation, choosing to continue with the test. Who would have thought that the result would be like this? If that Zhuowen's cultivation was higher, he would not be afraid of Yuan Zhao at all. Unfortunately, his cultivation is too low, so it is understandable that he was defeated by Yuan Zhao in the fight for the number 1 jade token. An uproar and discussions began to spread in the open space. Many people began to feel pity for Zhuowen, but there were also many who took pleasure in his misfortune. With Big Brother taking action, that little bastard still wants to live? He still wants to compete with my Big Brother for number 1. He is simply courting death. Yuanxing revealed a cold smile as he muttered. The two siblings, Jianan and Gatha, were deathly pale, while Mo Lingtian's brows were slightly furrowed. Clearly, this kind of result was somewhat unacceptable to them. Haha, Cheng Dong, you have to accept your loss. This time, Yuan Zhao is the new student king. Shouldn't you hand over your 9 twists treasure recovery pill to me? Qi Ji laughed complacently and unceremoniously spread his hands towards Cheng Dong. Cheng Dong's expression was somewhat ugly as he coldly said, "Let's talk about it after Yuan Zhao takes out the number 1 jade token. Why are you in such a hurry? Cheng Dong, you aren't still hoping that Zhuowen can create a miracle, are you? I think you should stop daydreaming. Only one person can obtain the first jade token, now that Yuan Zhao has come out, but that Zhuowen hasn't. Needless to say, that Zhuowen should be dead in the grotto." Qi Ji crossed his arms and continued, "However, I'm in a good mood now. Since you insist on waiting, I'll wait with you. When the time comes, don't try to deny it." Qi Ji sneered. His gaze once again focused on Yuan Zhao, who was still in the air. Once Yuan Zhao landed, he should be able to take out the number 1 jade token. At that time, everything would be easy to deal with. Supreme Jin's smile grew even more radiant as he stood on the platform like a blooming chrysanthemum. Even though he felt that it was a pity that Yuan Xing had not managed to enter the top 10, Yuan Kong had managed to clinch 5th place, while Yuan Zhao had clinched 1st place. This result was still very impressive. Boom! Boom! Just as everyone's attention was on Yuan Zhao, a terrifying vibration came from the exit of the head. The entire Thousand Beast Grotto shook. What's going on? Why is the Thousand Beast Grotto shaking all of a sudden? Sensing the Thousand Beast Grotto's violent tremors, everyone's eyes were filled with fear. Some even looked doubtful. Some of the sharper ones immediately saw Yuan Zhao emerge from the exit of the head, and fear filled their faces. It was as if they had seen something extremely terrifying. Boom! Boom! All of a sudden, lava gushed out from the mouth of the beast's head, and soared into the sky, forming a terrifying sea above the mouth of the beast's head. At this moment, everyone fell silent as they stared in shock at the terrifying sea of lava. They were very confused. Why was there such a terrifying sea of lava gushing out from the exit of the head? A sea of lava? Why would there be such a terrifying sea of lava at the exit of the head? An uproar immediately broke out. Not good. Yuan Zhao. Supreme Jin was the first to react. This was because he realized that the terrifying sea of lava was rushing towards Yuan Zhao. This sea of lava was far too terrifying. Most heavenly venerables would find it difficult to withstand this terrifying sea of lava. Swoosh! With that, Supreme Jin stomped his foot and golden light gushed out from his entire body. He turned into a golden ray of light and shot towards Yuan Zhao, who was above the sea of lava. Boom! Boom! The endless sea of lava instantly churned with thousands of gigantic waves, forming a wall of lava that was 10,000 feet tall, blocking Supreme Jin outside. Get lost! Supreme Jin roared angrily as 9 dazzling golden stars surged out from his body in an attempt to blast the wall of lava in front of him apart. Boom! Boom! Supreme Jin was indeed powerful, and he was much more powerful than Supreme Emperor Qing. As the 9 golden stars shot out, even the 100,000 feet tall wall of lava crumbled inch by inch under the might of the 9 golden stars. Unfortunately, the sea of lava was too large. Even though Supreme Jin had blasted the wall of lava in front of him apart, more and more lava continued to gush out, forming a terrifying wall of lava that seemed endless. No! Save me! Yuan Zhao's voice suddenly rang out from the center of the sea of lava. It was then followed by a blood-curdling scream, before his voice came to an abrupt end. Yuan Zhao's figure had been completely submerged by the sea of lava at that moment. Supreme Jin's expression changed greatly as he unleashed a barrage of punches. Unfortunately, no matter how terrifying his power was, he could not break through the outer layer of the magma sea's defenses. At this moment, everyone on the platform was in shock. They had watched with their own eyes as Yuan Zhao was swallowed by the sea of lava from the moment he appeared. The entire process was bizarre and confusing. They had not expected this to happen at all. Yuan Zhao had appeared in front of everyone, as they had expected. However, for some reason, such a terrifying sea of lava had appeared at the exit and swallowed Yuan Zhao whole. This scene was far too dramatic. The dean slowly rose to his feet. With a wave of his sleeve, a terrifying Yuan power formed a powerful light barrier around the platform, blocking off the incoming power of the lava. The dean's display of power was much more powerful than Supreme Jin's. It was no wonder that even Supreme Jin did not dare to act impudently in front of the dean. It turns out that the dean's power far surpassed Supreme Jin and the others. The sea of lava wreaked havoc in the sky above the exit for almost an hour before it finally stopped. Supreme Jin then retreated with a gloomy look in his eyes. The sea of lava was far too large. Even Supreme Jin found it difficult to reach the center of the sea of lava. He could only watch helplessly as Yuan Zhao was swallowed up. Another martial emperor from the Alcade Sacred Dynasty had also arrived in front of Supreme Jin. His expression was equally ugly as he asked in a low voice, "How is it?" Supreme Jin shook his head and turned his gaze towards the dean. "Dean, now, you should give me an explanation. Yuan Zhao was supposed to obtain the number 1 jade token, but why did such a terrifying sea of lava appear at the critical moment? I'm afraid that Yuan Zhao is most likely dead now." You have to give me an explanation. The dean's gaze was calm as he glanced indifferently at Supreme Jean. Then, he looked at the exit of the beast's head and smiled faintly. What? Are you still not coming out? Kid, you've caused such a huge commotion. You should give this old man an explanation. The dean's actions immediately attracted the attention of the crowd. Soon after, countless pairs of eyes turned towards the exit of the beast's head. However, the exit had already been flooded by lava, and there was no one left in sight. Could it be that the dean was deliberately mystifying things? Supreme Jean also turned his gaze towards the exit. When he realized that there was nothing but lava at the exit, his gaze turned extremely cold. He was certain that the dean was playing tricks on him. Just as Supreme Jean was about to explode, a clear voice suddenly rang out from the lava at the exit of the beast's head. Dean, you're truly perceptive. Even though I was hiding here, you were still able to discover me. As his voice faded, the lava at the exit slowly parted, revealing the original entrance of the cave. A tall figure slowly walked out from the cave with a smile on his face and a calm gaze. It's Zhuowen. He's actually not dead. Could it be that Zhuowen was the one who had unleashed that sea of lava? That sea of lava was so terrifying. How did Zhuowen control it? Isn't this too unbelievable? An uproar, a clamor, and a cacophony of voices rang out around the station at this moment. The sound of so many voices intertwining together was deafening. Zhuowen slowly stepped out of the sea of lava and looked at the lava that was beginning to solidify in the sky. A trace of pity appeared in his eyes. This lava would solidify into rocks the moment it came into contact with the air outside. Hence, Zhuowen could only use this terrifying sea of lava attack once. Since he had used it this time, he would naturally not be able to use it again. The first jade token is in your hands, right? The dean asked with a smile. Even the dean was a little surprised by Zhuowen's way of making an appearance. This little guy always seemed to be a maverick. Zhuowen nodded. With a flip of his right hand, the jade token with strange runes engraved on the front suddenly appeared in his hand and was presented to the dean. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Countless gazes gathered on the jade token in Zhuowen's hand. Then the entire station tacitly fell into silence. No one had expected that the first jade token would be obtained by Zhuowen, who was only at the Supreme Being realm. Such an outcome was beyond everyone's expectations. Not bad. You're pretty good to be able to obtain the first jade token. Go up to the station, the dean said with a smile. Nodding, Zhuowen lifted his foot and walked towards the station. However, after taking a few steps, two figures appeared in front of him. Two terrifying murderous intents immediately locked onto Zhuowen. What is the matter? Zhuowen slowly raised his head and calmly stared at the two people in front of him. These two people were Supreme Jean and another martial emperor from the Alcade Sacred Dynasty. Were you the one who released the sea of lava? Were you the one who killed Yuan Zhao? Supreme Jean asked word by word. His voice was extremely cold. Yuan Zhao recklessly fought with me for the first jade token. He deserved to die. In the rock cave, the strong live and the weak die. Are you going to interfere in the killing of a weakling? Zhuowen replied indifferently. Boom. Chapter 1001. And, no one has ever dared to kill a member of my Alcade Sacred Court in front of me. You're just a mere supreme being. So what kind of despicable method did you use to borrow such a powerful sea of lava to kill the first prince of my Alcade Sacred Court? Supreme Jean glared daggers at Zhuowen as he questioned. What a joke. What despicable method did I use? The sea of lava was my own method. How did it become a despicable method in your mouth? Zhuowen's gaze turned cold. Supreme Jean was obviously trying to push the blame onto him. The people of the Alcade Sacred Court were really shameless. They were trying to find an excuse to push the blame onto Zhuowen, even though they had lost. That's right. My big brother was famous throughout his life. He was extremely talented. How could an ant like you compare to him? You must have used some kind of despicable method to kill my big brother. Yuanqing stepped out from the open space and pointed at Zhuowen as he shouted. At this moment, Yuan Kong also stepped out from the station. His eyes were filled with coldness as he stared at Zhuowen. If you want to condemn someone, You can always find a pretext. Yuan Zhao was drowned by the sea of lava in front of everyone. Why are you saying that I, Zhuowen, used some kind of despicable method? Zhuowen said indifferently. And you, the loser, keep saying that I'm a supreme being ant. Back then you lost an arm to me. What are you then? Aren't you worse than an ant? At this point, Zhuowen's sharp eyes stared coldly at Yuansheng, who was standing on the open space. The latter involuntarily took a step back with an ugly expression on his face. You're still trying to quibble? I think you're really courting death. Not only did you use despicable methods to snatch Yuan Zhao's first place, you even used some kind of despicable method to kill Yuan Zhao. A despicable and shameless person, like you, doesn't have the right to enter the Divine Academy. Die. As soon as Supreme Jin finished speaking, a terrifying energy burst forth. Instantly, 9 golden stars descended from the sky and smashed down towards Zhuowen, intending to crush Zhuowen to death. Everyone in the station was stunned. No one had expected Supreme Jin to attack at this moment. In fact, there had been no warning at all. Furthermore, Supreme Jin's attack was extremely terrifying. He had used his full strength. No matter how heaven-defying Zhuowen was, it was impossible for him to survive this attack. After all, Supreme Jin was a terrifying existence at the Third Heaven Emperor realm. Even a cultivator at the peak of the heavenly venerable realm would be annihilated in an instant before him. Boom! Boom! However, just as the 9 golden stars were about to reach the sky above Zhuowen, an even more terrifying power exploded. Then, the 9 terrifying golden stars were annihilated at the same time as Supreme Jin was pushed back by this power. Whoosh! A kind-looking old man stood in front of Zhuowen. However, the old man no longer had a gentle smile on his face. Instead, his expression was cold, and his eyes were filled with coldness. Supreme Jin, Zhuowen is this year's newcomer king of the outer yard. You attacked me without even greeting me. What is the meaning of this? The old man was the headmaster. At that moment, the headmaster shouted coldly. Supreme Jin was stunned. Soon after, his expression changed and he quibbled. Dean, don't be deceived by this fellow's one-sided words. Do I need you to interfere in my affairs? Are you the dean of the outer court, or am I the dean of the outer court? The dean's gaze had turned even colder. Supreme Jin was really pushing his luck. Supreme Jin's expression froze. He then joined his fists and said, Please calm down, Dean. I was too impulsive just now. The dean glanced indifferently at Supreme Jin. He then flicked his sleeves and said, You must remember that this is the splendid Spirit Island, and not the Alcade Sacred Dynasty. If you dare to kill Zhuowen, or any other student of the outer court on the splendid Spirit Island, I will kill you. Not even the Holy Lord of the Alcade Sacred Dynasty will be able to save you. Supreme Jin's heart trembled when he heard these words. The dean was really ruthless. He had actually said such harsh words. It was obvious that he was protecting Zhuowen. If he really dared to touch Zhuowen, the dean would most likely do as he said and kill him. Based on the splendid Spirit Island's background, if the dean really killed him, the Holy Lord of the Alcade Sacred Dynasty would not be able to save him. The rest of the people on the station were also shocked. The dean's words were too ruthless. For the sake of Zhuowen, the dean had even dared to kill Supreme Jin. Who else would dare to touch Zhuowen on the splendid Spirit Island? After saying these words, the dean led Zhuowen up the station. Zhuowen was a little surprised by the dean's attitude. Although his talent was indeed strong, and he had obtained the first place among the new students, Zhuowen always felt that the dean's attitude towards him was completely different from the others. At this moment, the other 9 geniuses on the station were looking at Zhuowen with extreme fear. They were well aware of how terrifying Yuan Zhao was. Yuan Zhao was a mid-heavenly venerable, and his battle prowess was also far superior to other geniuses. However, he still could not win against Zhuowen, who was only at the Supreme Being stage. Brother Zhua, I really did not expect you to be so fierce. You're clearly only at the Supreme Being stage, but your battle prowess is monstrous. Even Yuan Zhao was killed by you. Mo Lingtian came to Zhuowen's side and smiled bitterly. Back then, on the deck of the boundless sailboat, Zhuowen had fought Yuansheng and cut off one of Yuansheng's arms. At that time, Emo Lingtian had already thought that he had overestimated Zhuowen. However, after the outer court's recruitment test began, Zhuowen broke records and norms again and again, causing Emo Lingtian to be shocked again and again. It was only in the end that Emo Lingtian realized that he had not overestimated Zhuowen, but had underestimated Zhuowen's strength. After this period of contact, Emo Lingtian also realized that he could not see through Zhuowen anymore. Zhuowen's body seemed to be shrouded in layers of fog. Only when he lifted one layer, and thought that he had completely seen through Zhuowen's secrets, did he realize that there was another layer of fog within this layer. It was as if there was no end to it. Zhuowen shrugged and said ambiguously, "Actually, there was a bit of luck involved." Emo Lingtian shook his head. Naturally, he did not believe Zhuowen's words. However, he was also very smart. He knew that Zhuowen did not want to explain too much on this topic, so he did not ask too much. After exchanging a few words with him, he silently waited for the dean's arrangements. This time, the outer court's recruitment test has completely come to an end. This old man is very gratified, because the quality of this batch of new students is very good. I believe that you all already have a solid foundation. To be able to enter the outer court, you all did not rely on luck, but on your strength to fight for it. Previously, you all were the top geniuses of your respective factions, and your foundations were very good. However, this old man wants to tell you that your martial path has only just begun. You all are geniuses, but the title of geniuses only applies to your respective regions. But now, you have already entered the Divine Academy, so you are a student of the Academy. Moreover, this old man can clearly tell you that your talent and strength in the entire outer court is actually not very strong. In the outer court, there are many people who are younger than you and stronger than you. Therefore, after entering the outer court, do not be arrogant because of your talent. That will only ruin your talent in vain. When the dean said this, he saw that many of the 500 people had a trace of disapproval in their eyes. He knew that his words did not have much of an effect. However, the dean was not discouraged. There were far more geniuses in the outer court than in the outside world. Once these little fellows truly entered the outer court, they would know how high the sky was and how deep the earth was. Alright, this old man has said what needs to be said. Now the top 10 new students will follow this old man. The 7 of you will be responsible for the remaining people. The dean instructed the 4 old men behind him, as well as Cheng Dong, Hu Jia and Qi Ji. Then, he led Zhuowen, Yin Zhongyang Pom Pom, and the rest of the top 10 geniuses out of the place. Looking at the departing figure of Zhuowen, Supreme Jin, and the other martial emperor looked extremely gloomy. This time, the Alcade Sacred Dynasty had suffered a great loss. Yuan Zhao was the strongest genius of the Alcade Sacred Dynasty. It would not be a problem for him to ascend to the martial emperor realm. Moreover, if there were some opportunities, he could directly break through to the middle-level martial emperor realm. Moreover, the Sacred Lord of the Alcade Sacred Dynasty had the intention of passing the throne to Yuan Zhao. He was only waiting for Yuan Zhao to complete his studies in the Divine Academy before ascending to the throne as the new Alcade Sacred Lord. But now, because of that despicable Zhuowen, Yuan Zhao had died in front of them. Moreover, his corpse was not even left behind. They would not be able to report back to their superiors. Just as Supreme Jin and Supreme Jin were frowning miserably, a figure suddenly appeared next to them and said a few words to them. Supreme Jin and Supreme Jin, who had been frowning miserably, suddenly became cheerful. Their eyes even flashed with a deep cold light. After the dean led the top 10 new students away, the 4 old men, Cheng Dong, Qi Ji, and Hu Jia began to arrange the remaining new students behind them. Qi Ji, don't go yet. Our bet from before still stands. Hand over the chips, will you? Cheng Dong suddenly walked in front of Qi Ji and said excitedly. Even Cheng Dong did not expect that Zhuowen would really win the title of newcomer king this time. One should know that the kid was only in the supremacy stage and already had such shocking combat strength. If he were to advance to the golden supremacy stage, or even the heavenly supremacy stage, wouldn't his combat strength be even more terrifying? Chengdong was certain that if Zhuowen's cultivation base were to advance to the heavenly supremacy stage, his combat strength would be comparable to a martial emperor realm powerhouse. To have the strength of a martial emperor before becoming a martial emperor, such a monstrous genius was very rare in their outer court. Perhaps only those monstrous geniuses who were ranked at the top of the heavenly supremacy ranking could achieve such a feat at this moment. Qi Ji's face was green and white. Even he did not expect such an outcome. It should have been a bet that was in the bag, but it ended in such a way that he felt helpless. Not only did the mid-level heavenly supremacy Yuan Zhao not win the title of newcomer king, he even lost his life. Qi Ji really did not expect this. Qi Ji, are you going back on your word? I was also present at that time. You can't go back on your word. Hu Jiao also came over and said with a grin. Qi Ji's expression turned even uglier. He snorted coldly and took out the shield-shaped low-grade royal rank spiritual treasure that he had promised. Chapter 1002. Arcane Tower and Cultivation Tower. Qi Ji's face sank. The heaven-raising sword was his natal spiritual treasure. If he lost it, it would have a huge impact on his strength. Looking at Qi Ji's appearance, Chengdong didn't know what the former was thinking. He frowned and said, Qi Ji, are you going back on your word? Qi Ji coldly snorted and said, Chengdong, don't worry. I, Qi Ji, am not that despicable. However, the heaven-raising sword is my natal spiritual treasure. This thing is too important to me. Moreover, you are not a sword cultivator. What use is it to you? Therefore, I plan to use the equivalent contribution points to exchange for the heaven-raising sword. Chengdong frowned and nodded. The heaven-raising sword is indeed of no use to me. Use contribution points to exchange for my agreement. With the value of the heaven-raising sword, 100,000 contribution points shouldn't be too much, right? Hearing this, Qi Ji's face turned green. Why didn't Chengdong just rob him? 100,000 contribution points was something that would take him at least a few years to accumulate. However, thinking of the importance of the heaven-raising sword, Qi Ji finally agreed to Chengdong's conditions and transferred 100,000 contribution points to Chengdong. After receiving the 100,000 contribution points, Chengdong was in a good mood. Naturally, his impression of Zhuowen increased. If it weren't for Zhuowen, he wouldn't have been able to obtain 100,000 contribution points so easily. So. A series of sonic booms cut through the sky above the main city of Excellent Spirit Island. They arrived at the center of the main city. In the center of the main city, there was an extremely large building complex. There were tall towers, pavilions, gardens, fake mountains, and the fragrance of flowers. Moreover, in this complex, there were many young warriors coming and going from time to time. It looked very lively. This is the core of the main city, the outer court of Excellent Spirit Academy. In the future, you will be cultivating here for several years. The dean pointed at the huge complex below and smiled at the 10 freshmen behind him. Zhuowen also followed behind the dean, looking down at the buildings below. His gaze had a trace of emotion. The size of the main city was already exaggerated enough, but the core of the main city, the Divine Academy, was even more shocking. It actually took up half of the main city's surface area. The entire outer courtyard was like a small world with its own ecosystem. Inside there was practically everything. The facilities were complete, and Zhuowen discovered that there were 2 buildings that stood out from the rest in Excellent Divinity Institute. Both of these structures were in the shape of towers. One of them was covered in countless strange runes that radiated with terrifying destructive power. Zhuowen could tell with a single glance that the runes on the tower were the work of an arcanist, and a very high-grade one at that. As for the other tower-like building, its surface was actually red and blue. Zhuowen also discovered that in this red and blue tower, the red one was rolling with blazing heat, while the blue one was releasing a terrifying cold air. It was as if the energy of ice and fire had perfectly fused together in this tower. Everything seemed so harmonious. The ice-fire holy rune is moving? When Zhuowen's gaze was focused on the red and blue tower, the ice-fire holy rune on the back of his hands suddenly started to move. Fortunately, Zhuowen forcefully suppressed this strange movement, so that no one else could discover it. However, Zhuowen's gaze was fixed on the red and blue tower. This tower that possessed the fusion of ice and fire energy definitely had an inseparable relationship with the Ice-Fire Holy Rune. This tower should have a trace of the Ice-Fire Holy Rune's origin? Xiao Hei's voice quietly sounded in Zhuowen's mind, causing Zhuowen's pupils to shrink. Another trace of origin? Could it not be the original body of the Ice-Fire Holy Rune? Zhuowen suddenly asked. Xiao Hei shook her head and said, "Could it be that you don't remember what the rune spirit of the Ice-Fire Holy Rune said? That fellow said that his original body was in the Hall of Ice and Fire, in the Divine Academy's inner courtyard. This is only the outer courtyard. So how could the original body of the Ice-Fire Holy Rune exist here?" Zhuowen nodded. Xiao Hei was right. Back then, the rune spirit had clearly said that his original body was in the Hall of Ice and Fire in the inner courtyard. These words should be true. As for this tower that was formed from the fusion of ice and fire energy in the outer courtyard, it was most likely built by someone from the outer courtyard to imitate the Hall of Ice and Fire in the inner courtyard. However, what was the purpose of this tower? The dean also noticed that the gazes of the 10 people behind him were fixed on the 2 towers in the inner courtyard. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly as he explained. These 2 towers are the most important buildings in the outer courtyard. As he spoke, the dean's right hand pointed at the tower that was covered with runes and said, "This tower is called the Arcane Tower. It was built by the outer courtyard's chief arcanist, Lord Mufeng. Its purpose is to nurture outer courtyard geniuses with mental energy talent." Mufeng. Zhuowen's eyes flashed. He was very familiar with the name Mufeng. Back then, Elder Shiwan had mentioned this person to him. It was said that Mufeng had a clue about the 1,000-fold stone that could increase the success rate of fusing 9 types of earth fire. Moreover, Zhuowen's sharp senses noticed that the dean was very respectful towards Mufeng. When he added the word Lord, his eyes were filled with admiration. Zhuowen knew that this Mufeng was not simple. It was very possible that he was the arcane heavenly master who had set up the Yuan gathering array in the main city that Little Black had mentioned. If that was really the case, then Mufeng was indeed amazing. Although Zhuowen had never seen how terrifying an arcane heavenly master was, Xiao Hei had a very high evaluation of them. They were far more terrifying than ordinary Emperor Realm experts. After all, an arcane heavenly master was able to create a 7th-grade origin formation that was comparable to a demonic weapon. Without a doubt, even high-level Emperor Realm experts would not dare to provoke an arcane heavenly master. After all, a 7th-grade origin formation was too terrifying. After introducing the arcane tower, the dean pointed at the red and blue tower with his right hand again and said, "This is the outer courtyard's cultivation tower. It contains powerful ice and fire energy. This energy is very mysterious and can temper your meridians, increasing the capacity of your meridians and providing a shortcut for your cultivation." Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. As soon as the dean said that, the rest of the geniuses behind him immediately looked at the cultivation tower. Among them, other than Zhuowen, who had the talent to become an arcanist, the others did not have such talent. Therefore, they were naturally not interested in the arcane tower. However, this cultivation tower actually had the effect of tempering a cultivator's meridians. This point attracted everyone's attention. In a cultivator's cultivation, the dantian was the most important, followed by the meridians. After all, the meridians were the channels that channeled origin energy into the dantian. The meridians of the human body were extremely complicated and were divided into many types. For example, the 8 extraordinary meridians, the 12 meridians, the Ren and Du meridians, and so on. It could be said that the meridians were an important organ for a cultivator's cultivation. However, the meridians were innate. Some people were born with thick meridians that could contain several times more origin energy than a normal person. Naturally, their cultivation speed would be several times faster than a normal person. These people were commonly known as geniuses. Some people were born with small meridians that could even be blocked. They could not contain much origin energy, and their cultivation speed would be extremely slow. Some people were even unable to cultivate. These people were trash. and were destined to have no fate with the martial path. As for the method of tempering meridians, it was basically unheard of in the outside world. It could even be said that it was very rare. After all, if such a method really existed, then it would be completely possible to create a monstrous genius with a terrifying cultivation speed. But now this cultivation tower in the outer courtyard actually had the effect of tempering meridians. This could not help but cause the 10 people's expressions to change. They all stared at the cultivation tower with burning gazes. They also finally knew why the students of Excellent Divine Academy were all extraordinary. It was mainly due to the cultivation tower. Dean, there must be a price to enter the cultivation tower, right? Pom Pom, who was carrying a long sword on his back, suddenly asked. The dean nodded and said, "Of course. If you want to enter the cultivation tower to cultivate, then you must pay a corresponding amount of contribution points. Moreover, the cultivation tower has a total of 10 floors. The higher the floor, the better the tempering effect. Of course, the required contribution points will also be higher." Dean, how do you obtain contribution points? Yun Zhongyang also opened his mouth and asked. Contribution points. As the name implies, you must make a contribution to the academy in order to obtain the contribution points. In Excellent Divine Academy, there are many ways to obtain contribution points. In the future, you will slowly find out. However, the most mainstream way to obtain contribution points is to accept the academy's missions. After completing the missions, you will be able to obtain contribution points. Hearing the dean's explanation, Zhuowen, Pom Pom, and the rest of the 10 people all nodded their heads. It seemed like contribution points were very important in the academy. Do you know why I called the 10 of you here alone? The dean smiled and asked the 10 people behind him. Zhuowen and the rest naturally shook their heads as they silently cursed in their hearts. Who would be able to guess your thoughts? After all, you are the top 10 freshmen this year. To be able to stand out from tens of thousands of people, you have already proven your talent and ability. I have specially brought you here, mainly to give you the top 10 freshman rewards. Now follow me. I will bring you to receive your rewards. After saying that, the dean waved his sleeves and led them into the Excellent Divine Academy. The Excellent Divine Academy was indeed very large. Within it, there were countless pavilions and terraces. Moreover, the Excellent Divine Academy students that they met along the way were all full of energy and had strong cultivations. When the Excellent Divine Academy students saw the dean bring Zhuowen, Pom Pom, and the rest of the 10 people in, they first revealed astonished expressions before respectfully bowing towards the dean. Zhuowen even noticed that many of the surrounding students were pointing at the 10 of them and whispering to each other, as if they were admiring some rare exotic beast. With regards to the surrounding seniors pointing and whispering, Zhuowen also felt a little helpless. However, he did not take it to heart. The dean brought the 10 of them through an ancient corridor, pavilions and courtyards. Finally, they arrived at a rather large pavilion. This was a study room. On the surrounding walls of the room, there were paintings and calligraphy. In the middle of the room, there was a wooden table made of red sandalwood. On the side of the wooden table, there were rows of books. It looked elegant and unique. Chapter 1003. Contribution counter. Standing in front of the desk, the 10 of them looked at each other in dismay. They never thought that the dean would give them 2 types of rewards. Dean, can contribution points be used to exchange for spirit treasures, elixirs and the like? Pom Pom suddenly stood up and asked. Of course. The dean nodded. Then I'll choose contribution points. Pom Pom calmly said. Since contribution points could be exchanged for spirit treasures and elixirs, and the dean had said that contribution points could be used to enter the cultivation pagoda, it was obvious that contribution points were more flexible than physical objects. Moreover, in Garcia Divine Academy, contribution points would definitely be used everywhere. Thus, Pom Pom chose to exchange for contribution points. After all, with contribution points, it would undoubtedly be easier to do things in the academy. The dean's eyes revealed a trace of craftiness as he asked. Are you sure you want to choose contribution points? Pom Pom was a little suspicious of the dean's attitude. Her eyes narrowed as she nodded. I'm sure. The dean nodded and looked at the other 9. What about the 9 of you? Is it the same as Pom Pom's choice? Do you also have to choose contribution points? They weren't stupid and naturally knew that contribution points were more flexible than physical objects. It would be strange if they didn't choose contribution points. Zhuowen felt that the dean's attitude was a little strange. Although he felt that something was wrong, Zhuowen still chose contribution points. After all, contribution points should be the currency of Garcia Divine Academy. In the academy, contribution points were definitely needed everywhere. If one didn't have contribution points at the beginning, it would definitely be difficult to move forward in the academy. But what was the meaning of that crafty look in the dean's eyes? Could it be that behind the contribution points reward, there was some other secret? Since you have all decided, then your rewards will be changed to contribution points. This time, the 1st to 10th place will be rewarded with contribution points from 10,000 to 1,000. First place will be 10,000 and 10th place will be 1,000. Saying that, the dean waved his sleeves and 10 black rays flew out. Then, the 10 black rays were like small snakes that coiled around the right wrist of Zhuowen and the other 9, turning into something like a wrist guard. Zhuowen was shocked. He quickly raised his right hand and found that there was a black wrist guard on his right wrist. In the middle of the wrist guard, there was a light screen about an inch wide. The light screen showed the number 10,000. There's no need to be surprised. What you have in your hands is a contribution counter. This thing records the contribution points you have. The number inside represents the contribution points you have, the dean said unhurriedly. Everyone came back to their senses and nodded. It seemed like this so-called contribution counter meter was a rather important item. It was actually the medium and carrier of contribution points, used to record the number of contribution points. Zhuowen's gaze landed on Emo Lingtian's hand beside him. He saw that the contribution meter in Emo Lingtian's hand displayed a number of 1,000. Clearly, the amount of contribution points awarded by the dean was not unfair. All right, the rewards have already been given to all of you. Next, I will order people to arrange the accommodations for the 500 new students. This jade strip has recorded the geographical location of the Jiaxin Institute. Your accommodations are also clearly marked. Saying this, the dean waved his sleeves again. 10 jade strips flew out and landed in the hands of the 10 students. Also, the Jiaxin Institute has always been a free school. There will not be any restrictions on your freedom, nor will you be forced to learn anything. However, there is one thing you must remember. In the future, you must pay a fixed fee of 20,000 contribution points to the institute every year. If you are unable to reach this amount, you will be expelled. When the dean's words came out, the 10 of them trembled. The dean's words were quite pleasant to hear. He would not restrict their freedom, nor would he force them to learn anything. However, when he said that they would have to pay 20,000 contribution points every year, the 10 of them were speechless. Based on the new student rewards, it would not be easy to obtain these contribution points. However, this dean had opened his mouth like a lion. Every year, they would have to pay 20,000 contribution points. If they were unable to reach this amount, they would be expelled. Wasn't this forcing them to continuously do missions to accumulate contribution points to pay for the school fees? The 10 of them looked at each other. This dean looked kind and amiable, but in reality, he was a cunning old fox. Dean, I would like to ask you about a person. Suddenly Zhuowen stood up. Oh, who is it? The corner of the dean's mouth rose. Zhuowen clenched his fist and asked excitedly, Is there a girl called Mu Qinxue in the outer court? Mu Qinxue? The dean was startled at first, but soon after he nodded and continued. Yes. This little girl's talent is very strong. Her performance in the outer court is very strong. Then where is she now? Zhuowen's heart was about to jump out. Mu Qinxue was actually in the outer court. 3 months ago, this little girl advanced to the Emperor realm and was promoted to enter the inner court. The dean suddenly said. This sentence was like a bucket of cold water, causing Zhuowen to freeze in place. Is the inner court in the 9 underworld realm? And how can I enter the inner court? Zhuowen frowned and asked in disappointment. The lowest requirement to enter the inner court is the Emperor Realm. If you can advance to the Emperor Realm in the outer court, then you have the qualifications to enter the inner court. The dean said indifferently. Emperor Realm? Zhuowen frowned. He didn't expect that the requirement to enter the inner court was so high. One had to be at least in the Emperor Realm to enter? Looks like I won't be able to see Mu Qinxue for a while. Luckily, there are still 2 years before the cold poison acts up. There should still be time. Although he was disappointed, Zhuowen didn't lose his fighting spirit. Instead, he silently said to himself, "All right, you guys can leave this place. You can also walk around the academy and familiarize yourself with the atmosphere." At this point, the dean's eyes flashed with a trace of craftiness. The 10 of them nodded, but in their hearts they were puzzled. This dean brought them here for no reason, just to give them some reward points, and then leave with a few words? This was a little inexplicable. Brother Zhua, let's walk around the Jiaxin Academy and familiarize ourselves with the atmosphere. Mo Lingtian came to Zhuowen's side and smiled. Zhuowen nodded. Just as he was about to leave with Mo Lingtian, a figure suddenly blocked his path. Raising his head, he saw Pomda's sharp gaze staring straight at Zhuowen. "What's the matter?" Zhuowen asked indifferently. "Zhuowen, you're very strong. In the Thousand Beasts Grotto, I was inferior and admitted defeat. However, this is the Jiaxin Academy. With my talent and the Academy's resources, my cultivation and strength will definitely increase by leaps and bounds. When the time comes, I will ask you for some advice. When the time comes, I hope you won't disappoint me." Pomda said, full of fighting spirit. Zhuowen smiled faintly and said, "Don't worry. I definitely won't disappoint you. On the other hand, you shouldn't disappoint me." Pomda's pupil shrank, but he laughed and said, "Don't worry, next time we fight, you won't be disappointed." After saying that, Pomda turned around and left without any hesitation. Zhuowen nodded as he looked at Palm Tree's sharp back. Palm Tree's martial heart was extremely firm. Although he had been defeated by Zhuowen in the Myriad Beasts Grotto, he didn't have any resentment. Instead, he was even more determined to pursue martial arts. With Pomda's current mentality and aptitude, Zhuowen knew that Pomda's future achievements wouldn't be low. As soon as Pomda left, Zhuowen felt a venomous gaze directed at him. Turning his head, he saw Yin Zhongyang staring at him with an unkind expression, as if he was about to devour him. "What? You're not satisfied? Do you think that the punishment of breaking your arms wasn't enough?" Zhuowen said indifferently. Yin Zhongyang's eyelids twitched and he coldly said, "Don't be so smug. Do you think anything can happen in the Jiaxin Academy? You're only in the venerable realm right now, while I'm already a heavenly venerable. I'll definitely become a martial emperor before you. At that time, let's see how you'll be my opponent." After saying that, Yin Zhongyang swaggered off, while Zhuowen sneered. Yin Zhongyang had lost to him twice, so it probably left a shadow in his heart. With his current state of mind, who knew how long it would take for him to advance to the martial emperor realm? Moreover, while Yin Zhongyang was improving, Zhuowen was also improving. When the time came, Yin Zhongyang would probably suffer a crushing defeat at his hands again. Zhuowen didn't pay too much attention to Yin Zhongyang's words. Zhuowen was the type of person who wouldn't offend others unless they offended him. If someone offended him, Zhuowen would definitely use thunderous methods to teach them a lesson. Of course, Yin Zhongyang wasn't the only one looking at him with resentment. Among them, the 5th-ranked Sky Origin also had an extremely unfriendly gaze. In front of the Myriad Beasts Grotto, not only had Zhuowen beaten him and his third brother, but his eldest brother, Yuan Zhao, had also died because of Zhuowen. Their Alcate sacred dynasty and Zhuowen were already irreconcilable. So how could Sky Origin be nice to Zhuowen? However, Sky Origin didn't say anything. Instead, he revealed a strange smile to Zhuowen and left. Looking at Sky Origin's back, Zhuowen frowned slightly. He had a feeling that Sky Origin was acting strange. As for why he had such a feeling, Zhuowen couldn't put his finger on it. Looks like I have to be careful of Sky Origin and the Yuanqing brothers. Narrowing his eyes, Zhuowen muttered in a low voice. Although Yuanxing and Sky Origin were weaker than him, he was afraid that the two brothers would think of ways to scheme against him. Therefore, he had to be on guard against them. Walking out of the dean's study, there was an extremely large square 100 meters in front of the study. There were many students in the Divine Academy's uniform standing on the square. These students had their hands crossed in front of their chests, as if they were waiting for something. When Zhuowen, Pom-Pom, and the other freshmen walked out of the study and arrived at the square, the students who were waiting immediately stood up like cats that had smelled blood. They stared at Zhuowen and the other freshmen with burning eyes, as if they were hunters that had spotted their prey. Zhuowen frowned slightly. These people should be the seniors of the academy, so why were they gathered in the square? Moreover, it seemed like they were waiting for the 10 of them. Haha, you're finally out. We've been waiting for you for a long time, my dear juniors. Chapter 1004. Snatching contribution points. Who are you? We don't seem to know you, do we? Why are you waiting for us? Yin Zhongyang was the first to speak. He stared at the burly man with an unruly gaze. Just now, he had sensed that the burly man's aura was at the peak of the golden venerable realm. His cultivation was one level lower than his. With Yin Zhongyang's unruly personality, he naturally could not tolerate a cultivator with a lower cultivation than him speaking to him in such a manner. Of course, Zhuowen was an exception. After all, Zhuowen's combat power was too strong. Even though Yin Zhongyang was arrogant, he had to admit that Zhuowen was indeed stronger than him. But who was this burly man in front of him? He was only at the peak of the golden venerable realm, yet he dared to yell at him. He even looked at him, as if he did not care about them at all. The burly man chuckled. He did not seem to care about Yin Zhongyang's attitude. Instead, he pointed at the contribution points counter on Yin Zhongyang's right hand and said indifferently, "The 10 of you should be the top 10 freshmen this year. I'm afraid that you have received quite a lot of contribution points as a reward, right? If you don't want to suffer physical pain, contribute your contribution points." As soon as he said this, the 10 freshmen, including Yin Zhongyang, narrowed their eyes. The purpose of these outer yard seniors waiting for them in the square was to snatch the contribution points in their hands. The atmosphere in the square immediately fell into a strange freezing point. Zhuowen, Pom, and the rest of the freshmen did not expect that they would be intercepted by these seniors the moment they walked out of the dean's study. Looking at the burly man's gaze, it was obvious that he already knew that they would be able to obtain contribution points. He had purposely waited for them on this path with the goal of snatching the contribution points in their hands. Zhuowen frowned slightly as he looked at the senior students blocking the way in the plaza. He could not help but recall the craftiness in the dean's eyes in the study. It seemed that the dean had long predicted that they would encounter such a situation. In other words, contribution points could be snatched away. It seemed that the outer yard was not a peaceful place. The law of the jungle was still vividly displayed here. However, there was one thing that was better than the outside world, and that was that they could not kill each other in the academy. At this moment, the dean had already walked out of the study and stood in the shade of a tree in a rather remote area. He silently watched everything that was happening in the square in front of him, and 2 figures had unknowingly appeared behind him. The 2 figures were a man and a woman. The man was about 30 years old and had a head full of golden hair. He looked like a mighty lion and had a rough aura. The other woman was very young. She had a graceful figure and was extremely beautiful. She held an ancient zither in her hands. Mangshi Wushang, what do you 2 think? The dean suddenly asked the 2 people behind him. The golden-haired Mangshi looked at Zhuowen's back with a complicated expression. He said, "These 10 people all have excellent talents. This is especially so for Zhuowen. His talent is extraordinarily horrifying. Initially, I thought that this lad would fall in the Qing Xian Empire. I didn't expect him to be so lucky. Even the Qing Emperor couldn't do anything to him." The dean nodded and suddenly said to the beautiful woman beside him, "Don't you want to meet Zhuowen?" Moyan Wushang shook his head and said, "Uncle Mangshi forced me to leave the Qing Xian Empire." As a result, Zhuowen was attacked from both sides. I really don't know how to face him. Mangshi scratched his head and said guiltily, Wu Shang, you can't blame me. You can't blame me. If Emperor Qing was really angry, he might have killed us. If Emperor Qing was a first-level martial emperor, we could have fought him together. But Emperor Qing was a second-level martial emperor. Moyan Wu Shang shook his head and said softly, Uncle Mangshi, I know what you mean. I don't mean to blame you. It's just that I don't know how to face Zhuowen now. The dean nodded and didn't say anything. He looked at the square and said with a smile, Don't mention it. Wu Shang, you have been at the peak Heavenly Master realm for a long time. It's time for you to break through to the Emperor realm. Once you succeed, you will be promoted to the inner courtyard like Mu Chenxue. Moyan Wu Shang nodded. Her cultivation was at the peak Heavenly Master realm. If she succeeded, she would have a high chance of breaking through to the Emperor realm. Now let's see how these 10 young fellows will deal with the senior students. After all, these 10 young fellows are in the top 10 of this year's freshmen. It's inevitable that they will be proud and arrogant. Letting the senior students teach them a lesson will be good for their future development. As he said that, the dean looked at the square in front of him and observed everything that was happening there with great interest. Mangshi and Moyan Wu Shang also looked at the square curiously. They also wanted to know the strength of the top 10 freshmen, especially Zhuowen. Although Zhuowen used the 100 transformation technique to change his appearance, the dean could see through Zhuowen's disguise. Therefore, Moyan Wu Shang and Mangshi knew that this Zhuowen was the Zhuowen from the Qingxian Empire. In the square, the confrontation between the top 10 freshmen and the black-faced man attracted the attention of many people. They gathered to watch the show. He Tao is going to blackmail the freshmen again. This year's top 10 freshmen are going to suffer again. What can we do? Although He Tao's cultivation is at the peak Golden Master realm, he already has the battle strength of a Heavenly Master. Last time, he almost entered the Heavenly Master list. He can be regarded as the first person under the Heavenly Master realm. Us seniors don't dare to provoke him. However, this is also under the dean's tacit approval. Every year, we seniors only get this little benefit. However, the quality of this year's freshman is much better than the previous one. There are actually 2 early-stage Heavenly Masters. One of them seems to be a sword cultivator. Discussions sounded like firecrackers in the surroundings. Many seniors stared at the top 10 freshmen mockingly. Brother Zhua, these seniors' cultivation is not very strong. How can they hold their heads high and provoke us? Mo Lingtian said with a frown. Zhuowen also felt a little strange. This group of seniors who gathered were mostly Golden Masters and Supremes. There were no Heavenly Masters. However, among the 10 freshmen, there were 2 early-stage Heavenly Masters. Moreover, other than Zhuowen and Mo Lingtian, the rest were all Golden Masters. He didn't know where these seniors got their confidence from. They thought that they could defeat them. He Tao slowly stepped forward. He pointed at Yun Zhongyang and said, Looking at you, you seem to be very unhappy about contributing contribution points. Could it be that you want to reject my suggestion? Yun Zhongyang's gaze was extremely cold. He had been crushed by Zhuowen many times during the test. It had already made his heart burn with anger. This dark-faced senior in front of him, who was only at the peak of Golden Venerable, actually dared to provoke him. With Yun Zhongyang's personality, how could he tolerate this? I think you're courting death. With a cold snort, Yun Zhongyang bent his knees and arched his waist. Then he suddenly shot out like a cannonball. He rapidly shot towards He Tao. The terrifying force almost formed a ring-shaped airwave in the air. Yo, you have quite a character. However, let me, your senior, teach you a good lesson. He Tao said mockingly. His eyes emitted a sharp light. With a stomp of his foot, a terrifying force burst out. At this moment, it was as if a huge mountain had suddenly appeared on top of He Tao, causing the pressure around him to increase tremendously. The moment He Tao's aura burst out, Zhuowen's pupils shrank. He Tao's aura was terrifying. It had actually far surpassed the average peak of Golden Venerable. Even the average beginner Heavenly Venerable might not necessarily be able to match He Tao's powerful aura. This He Tao is not simple, Zhuowen muttered to himself. The rest of the freshmen also revealed solemn expressions. Obviously, They had all noticed that Heitao was not ordinary. Blue whale diving sea. Yin Zhongyang's gaze was cold. His force burst out and turned into a vast sea. Chapter 1005. Poor Yin Zhongyang. As soon as he said that, the other seniors who had gathered around burst into laughter. They looked at Yin Zhongyang with ridicule. Yin Zhongyang's eyes were extremely gloomy, but he was secretly shocked by Heitao's combat strength. Heitao was only at the peak of the Golden Venerable Realm, so why was his combat strength so terrifying? Could it be that the combat strength of the seniors in the outer yard far exceeded their cultivation? My dear junior brother, I don't want to make things difficult for you. Hand over your contribution points. Heitao spread his hands and said to Yin Zhongyang mockingly, You want my contribution points? I don't think you have what it takes. Yin Zhongyang's eyes were extremely cold. He took a step forward and instantly appeared in front of Heitao. A blue trident appeared in his hand. It was the sea god's halberd. Sea god's sacrifice. Yin Zhongyang formed a seal with his hands. Suddenly, the sea around Yin Zhongyang surged with huge waves. Then, the sea god's halberd turned into the spine of the sea god. With the sea as his flesh, a huge phantom of the sea god was formed. Roar! Sea god! Yin Zhongyang roared. The phantom of the sea god took a step forward and rushed towards Heitao. Its giant foot was like a pillar that could hold up the sky. It did not hesitate to step on Heitao's head. It wanted to completely crush Heitao to death. Heitao's eyes flashed with a hint of excitement. He laughed loudly and threw out another punch. This punch seemed to be able to pierce through the sky, like a meteor streaking across the starry sky. Big Dipper meteor. A faint voice sounded. Then the meteor-like fist energy cut through the void and fell. In an instant, countless meteors fell from the void and smashed heavily on the phantom of the sea god. Crack! The meteor shower contained extremely terrifying fist energy. The power of this punch was much stronger than Heitao's tyrannical king's fist. Under the meteor-like fist energy, the phantom of the sea god was completely annihilated and turned into nothingness. Puchi! Yin Zhongyang spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was as pale as snow as he retreated. Heitao, on the other hand, did not show any mercy. Like a ghost, he instantly appeared in front of Yin Zhongyang and viciously stomped down on him. Rumble! Yin Zhongyang was caught off guard. He only felt a sharp pain in his chest before his back made intimate contact with the ground. The terrifying force almost caused him to pass out. The other 9 freshmen looked on in shock. Yin Zhongyang was ranked 3rd among the freshmen, and his cultivation level was at the early stage of the Heavenly Venerable Realm. Yet, he was being trampled by Heitao just like that. Especially when Heitao used the celestial meteor. Its power was terrifying. Coupled with Heitao's powerful fist intent, he was able to shatter Yin Zhongyang's sea god's sacrifice with a single punch. This Heitao's combat strength was even more terrifying than the average Empyrean martial artist. They didn't think that the older students of the Divine Academy would be so formidable. They had just entered, and they had already encountered such a tough opponent. My dear junior brother, if you hadn't been so stubborn in the beginning, you wouldn't have had to suffer. Now that you've already lost to me, I'll gladly accept your contribution points. Heitao smiled as he patted Yin Zhongyang's cheek. He then extended his right hand, which was also wearing a technical contribution sheet. Heitao matched his technical contribution sheet with Yin Zhongyang's technical contribution sheet. Instantly, the 8,000 points on Yin Zhongyang's technical contribution sheet decreased rapidly until it finally reached 0. Zhuowen and the others were astonished when they saw this. It seemed that contribution points could be transferred like this. No wonder Heitao wanted to snatch their contribution points. Only 8,000 points? You're only ranked 3rd among the freshmen? Heitao frowned when he saw that his contribution points had increased by 8,000 points. He was naturally very clear about the rewards for new students. From the 1st to the 10th place, the rewards were respectively 10,000 to 1,000 points. The reward for the 3rd place was 8,000 points. However, there were only 2 early-stage Empyrean geniuses among the top 10 freshmen this year. He thought that Yin Zhongyang would have at least 9,000 or 10,000 points. He didn't expect him to only have 8,000 points. Then you should be ranked first among the freshmen this year, right? I wonder which little fellow is ranked second. After He Tao pointed at Palm Tree, his gaze immediately fell on Yuankong and Shichue. Aside from Palm Tree and Yin Zhongyang, these two had the highest cultivation. They were both at the peak of Golden Venerable. He thought that the second place would be one of them. Palm Tree shook her head faintly. You misunderstood? I'm only ranked second among the freshmen. He Tao and the others in the square were stunned when they heard Palm Tree's words. Their eyes were filled with astonishment. Among the top 10 freshmen, there were only 2 early-stage Empyrean geniuses. Neither of them was ranked first among the freshmen. They were ranked second and third. Who was ranked first? They couldn't think of anyone among the top 10 freshmen who could be more abnormally powerful than Palm Tree and Yin Zhongyang. Of course, most of their attention was on Shichue and Yuankong. Their auras at the peak of the Golden Venerable realm were naturally the closest to that of a Heavenly Venerable. Moreover, it was possible that a Golden Venerable could surpass an early-stage Heavenly Venerable genius among the freshmen. If there really was such a monstrous genius among this batch of freshmen, it wouldn't take more than a few years for such a genius to rise up in the outer court. Of course, Zhuowen and Mo Lingtian, the 2 supreme-grade brats, were completely ignored by He Tao and the other seniors. After all, their cultivations were too insignificant among the top 10 freshmen. Looks like one of you two should be ranked first among the freshmen this time. He Tao was in high spirits as he stepped on Yin Zhongyang's body. His sharp gaze immediately landed on Yuankong and Shichue. Their expressions changed slightly as they shook their heads. He Tao's strength was too terrifying. Even Yin Zhongyang had been beaten up so badly by him. They didn't want to be the first to stand out. If it's not the two of you, could it be one of those 3? He Tao's gaze was cold as he pointed at Blue Smoke, Fun Ji, and Yuan Tong. However, the 3 of them quickly shook their heads. They didn't want to go up against a freak like He Tao. At this moment, He Tao's expression was a little ugly. Even the last 3 Golden Supreme Grade freshmen weren't ranked first among the freshmen this time. Could it be that the 2 remaining Supreme Grade brats were ranked first among the freshmen? Are you guys messing with me? None of the 8 of you are ranked first among the freshmen. Could it be that you want to tell me that the 2 Supreme Grade brats are ranked first among the freshmen? He Tao snorted coldly. He didn't believe that a mere Supreme Grade brat could be ranked first among the freshmen this time. It was simply inconceivable. A Golden Supreme Grade brat challenging a Heavenly Venerable was already considered a monstrous genius, but a Supreme Grade brat challenging a Heavenly Venerable was truly unbelievable. Moreover, this was a freshman who hadn't tempered his meridians in the cultivation tower. If it was the Supreme Grade seniors in the outer court who had cultivated in the cultivation tower for a period of time, they might be able to challenge an ordinary Heavenly Venerable. However, he didn't believe that a freshman who hadn't cultivated in the cultivation tower could be such a monstrous genius. Let me go. I'll tell you who's ranked first among the freshmen. At this moment, a weak voice came from under He Tao's foot. It was Yin Zhongyang's voice. He Tao nodded and released his foot. He said to Yin Zhongyang, "Tell me honestly, who's ranked first among the freshmen? Is it that guy with the sword on his back?" As he spoke, He Tao casually pointed at Yin Zhongyang, causing the latter to frown slightly. A sharp glint flashed across his eyes. At this moment, Yin Zhongyang was in an extremely sorry state. There was a trace of hatred in his eyes as he looked at He Tao, but he didn't show it. After that, Yin Zhongyang's cold gaze landed on Zhuowen. He grinned and pointed at Zhuowen saying, "This guy is ranked first among the freshmen." Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Chapter 1006. Against He Tao at the same time, Zhuowen also flashed the contribution points table in his hand. He knew that it would be useless even if he denied it. After all, he was indeed the top new student. When He Tao and the other seniors saw the number on the contribution points table on Zhuowen's wrist, They all fell silent for a moment before bursting into an uproar. The top new student is actually this kid with the lowest cultivation? He Tao's eyes narrowed as he muttered in a low voice. Now you believe that I didn't lie to you, right? Hurry up and let me go. Yun Zhongyang was very sullen at this moment, and said in a muffled voice. He Tao shrugged and said with a fake smile. Junior, I'm really sorry. It was all a misunderstanding just now. This is none of your business. You can leave now. Yun Zhongyang slowly got up. At this moment his face was too horrible to look at. Using a pig's head to describe it was more appropriate. Yun Zhongyang glanced hatefully at He Tao and left the square dejectedly. His contribution points had been snatched away by He Tao, so naturally, no one would stop him. Junior, you're quite lucky to be the top new student. How about this? Senior won't make things difficult for you. As long as you give me 9,900 contribution points, I'll let you go. How about it? He Tao came in front of Zhuowen and said with a smile. The corners of Zhuowen's mouth held a smile as he said, Senior, this Zhuo doesn't dare to agree to your request. These contribution points are what we deserve after risking our lives. Is it really okay for you to snatch them away like this? He Tao narrowed his eyes, and the smile on his face faded. He said indifferently, It seems that Junior intends to refuse Senior's kindness? As he said that, He Tao's face began to turn cold. The aura on his body surged out and formed countless astral winds on the surface of his body. Obviously, He Tao intended to snatch the contribution points by force. He Tao, I'll give you the contribution points of the top new student, and leave the remaining 8 to us. How about it? The moment He Tao's aura surged, another 8 figures walked out from the crowd in the square. These 8 people had strong auras, and their cultivation levels were at the peak of the Golden Venerate realm. They could be considered as one of the stronger seniors in the square. As soon as these 8 people appeared, the faces of many older students in the square, who were ready to make trouble, immediately fell. They are from the Emperor Pavilion. Isn't the person in the lead Du Tao from the Emperor Pavilion? He's not someone to be trifled with. It's actually Du Tao. This Du Tao's status in the Emperor Pavilion isn't low. Although his battle prowess is inferior to He Tao's, with the Emperor Pavilion, even He Tao wouldn't dare to not give Du Tao face, right? The older students in the square looked at these 8 people with fear in their eyes. It was obvious that these 8 people had an extraordinary background. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to intimidate the other restless older students. Du Tao, I really didn't expect that your rich and overbearing Emperor Pavilion would also join in on the fun. He Tao frowned slightly and said with some displeasure. Du Tao smiled indifferently and said, This isn't the Emperor Pavilion's decision. The 8 of us feel that we don't have enough contribution points to spend and want to earn some extra money. Hearing this, He Tao nodded and said with some fear, Since that's the case, I'll leave these 8 people to you. I'll take the first place among the new students. After he finished speaking, He Tao stomped his foot, and a terrifying energy soared. Then, a strong fist intent surged out, and he threw a punch at Zhuowen, as if he wanted to destroy Zhuowen with a single punch. This He Tao wasn't simple. Someone who could easily defeat Yun Zhongyang wasn't a simple character. Therefore, Zhuowen wouldn't underestimate him. With a flip of his right hand, a blood spear appeared in his hand. Then, he swung the blood spear, and a profound spear intent burst out, forming countless ice crystals. Boom! He Tao's fist landed on the ice crystals. When he felt the intent realm within the ice crystals, his eyes narrowed and he said, Spear intent. I didn't expect you to have grasped the intent realm. No wonder you could obtain the first place among the new students. You're really unique. But your cultivation is too weak. Break for me. After saying that, He Tao stomped his foot, and his fist intent became even more terrifying. With a punch, countless palm prints appeared, dazzling and dazzling. Kacha! As expected, Zhuowen's spear intent couldn't block He Tao's fist intent and instantly shattered. He Tao's fist intent was like a rainbow piercing through the sun, smashing towards Zhuowen's chest. The moment He Tao made his move, Du Tao led the other 7 members of the Emperor Pavilion and surrounded the 8 top 10 freshmen, including Pom Pom and Emolingtian. If you don't want to suffer, hand over your contribution points quickly. Du Tao looked down at Pom Pom's 8 and said indifferently. Pom Pom narrowed his eyes and didn't say anything. He stomped his foot and unsheathed the long sword on his back with his right hand. Countless sword chi burst out and Pom Pom was like a sharp sword that had just been unsheathed, instantly arriving in front of Du Tao. Sword/art. A cold and sharp voice rang out. Palm Master straightened his right palm, and a sharp sword pierced through space, slashing out horizontally. Immediately, a terrifying sword chi burst out, transforming into a crescent-shaped sword blade that shot towards Du Tao's chest, wanting to slash him to death at the waist. Pom Pom Pom's action directly showed his answer. If he wanted contribution points, he could only fight. Seems like you want to do things the hard way. Du Tao coldly snorted. With a flick of his finger, he took out a halberd from his spirit ring and raised it high above his head. Then he suddenly smashed it down. An earth-shattering power gushed out and heavily smashed onto the crescent-shaped sword light, directly annihilating the sword light. Subsequently, Du Tao's eyes were cold as he held the halberd and instantly arrived in front of Pom Pom. He flicked the halberd with both hands, and it turned into halberd shadows that covered the sky, sealing Pom Pom from all directions. While Du Tao and Palm Tree were fighting, Du Tao's 7 subordinates were already fighting with Emolingtian, Shike, and the other freshmen. Countless elemental energy forces swirled in the air, blossoming into multicolored balls of light above the plaza. At this moment, Heitao's fist was already closing in on Zhuowen. It was overbearing and wanted to completely destroy Zhuowen. Azura blood spear, Zhuowen said indifferently. He raised his blood spear, and a huge sea of blood gushed out from the void. The boundless sea of blood blocked Heitao's fist intent in front of Zhuowen. General momentum of heaven and earth? With his fist intent blocked, Heitao finally revealed a trace of surprise in his eyes. The young man before him, who was only at the Supreme Being realm, was truly extraordinary. He had actually comprehended the momentum of the world. Taking a few steps back, Heitao's gaze turned serious as he said, "Your combat strength is pretty good. It seems like you didn't get first place by luck. However, if that's all you've got, I think you should hand over your contribution points as soon as possible. I haven't gone all out yet. It's more appropriate for me to say those words, because I haven't gone all out either." Zhuowen lowered his head and said indifferently. Heitao's eyes narrowed, but he laughed out loud and said, "Good. Since that's the case, I won't hold back." Saying that, Heitao stomped his foot and punched out. Suddenly, countless astral winds were stirred up, and a domineering might gushed out from his fist. It was as if the one who punched out at this moment was an overlord who looked down on the world. Tyrant King's fist. The fist intent, along with the fist aura, set off countless whirlwinds, and arrived in front of Zhuowen in an instant. Zhuowen didn't dare to be careless, and immediately formed 4 heads and 8 arms. He formed 8 spear auras and formed 8 seas of blood that instantly entangled the Tyrant King's fist, preventing it from exerting its power. What a strange secret technique. It can actually form 4 heads and 8 arms? Heitao frowned. He was a little surprised by Zhuowen's current appearance, but he didn't think too much about it. He stomped his foot and punched out again. This time, his fist was like a meteor that tore through the void and fell from the sky, bringing with it a meteor shower. Celestial meteor. This move was very terrifying. Zhuowen had been defeated by this move just now. So Heitao knew that as long as he used this move, no matter how strong he was, Zhuowen would be defeated without any chance of winning. Boom, boom, boom. Countless meteors fell and smashed into the 8 seas of blood. The terrifying fist aura exploded in the meteor shower, like countless bombs exploding. Then, the 8 seas of blood that stretched as far as the eye could see all collapsed under this meteor shower. As the seas of blood collapsed, Zhuowen's figure was exposed. At this moment, Heitao's celestial meteor had completely locked onto Zhuowen's aura and swept over from all directions, sealing off all paths of retreat for Zhuowen. Looking at the countless meteors around him, Zhuowen's gaze was exceptionally calm. He slowly withdrew his 4-headed and 8-armed form and a terrifying demonic aura gushed out from his body. At this moment, it was as if a demon had awakened in Zhuowen's body. First stage of bedevilment. Boom. Boundless blood qi gushed out from Zhuowen's body. At that moment, Zhuowen's eyes were dyed red, and his black hair was dyed red. Demonic qi gushed out, making Zhuowen look like both a god and a demon. It was as if he was a demon from hell. Emosha. Zhuowen waved his right hand, and the blood spear in his hand floated in front of him. Then it split into 10 blood spears and revolved around Zhuowen's body. These 10 blood spears began to rotate and formed a blood-colored defense around Zhuowen's body. Boom, boom, boom. Countless meteors descended and blasted into the blood-colored defense. The dazzling starlight almost drowned Zhuowen's figure, and a series of explosions resounded in response. He Tao floated in the air above the starlight, looking down at Zhuowen's figure that was submerged in the starlight. He had a feeling that Zhuowen, who had turned into a red-haired, red-eyed Zhuowen, was much stronger than before. Boom! Suddenly, a blood pillar shot up from the countless starlight below. Then, the terrifying starlight was completely annihilated by the blood pillar. What? The celestial meteor was broken? He Tao's pupil shrank, and he retreated dozens of steps. He looked at the blood pillar that shot up to the sky, and the starlight fist aura that was being annihilated by it. Thump, 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 thump. In the blood pillar, a young man with red hair and red eyes slowly walked out. His body was surrounded by 10 blood spears. When the young man finally stepped out of the blood pillar, he slowly raised his head and stared at He Tao with his scarlet eyes, causing the latter's heart to palpitate. Chapter 1007. Snatch bang, bang, bang. Several collisions rang out, followed by a series of muffled groans. Shichiwe, Yuan Kong, Blue Smoke, Funji, Yuan Tong, Huang Xian and Emo Lingtian spat out blood at the same time as they flew back. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The 7 members of the Emperor Pavilion arrived in front of their defeated opponents and forcefully snatched their contribution points. The battle between Palm Deva and Du Tao had clearly reached its climax. Countless halberd images and sword auras intertwined in the air, as the sound of metal clashing continuously rang out. When the halberd images and sword auras reached their peak, they finally turned into a terrifying explosion of light. A muffled groan resounded from the exploding ball of light. Then, a figure flew out from the ball of light. When everyone's gazes finally converged on the figure, an expression of as expected appeared on their faces. That was because the figure that flew out was the second-ranked student, Palm Deva. At this moment, Palm Deva's hair was disheveled, and there was blood at the corner of his mouth. His breathing was hurried as he gasped for breath. His right hand that was holding onto the sword was slightly trembling as blood flowed out from his palm. He was in an extremely sorry state. Swoosh! A figure in his right hand smashed down from the explosion of light and smashed onto the ground. Terrifying energy spread out as a ring-shaped airwave was formed. Du Tao slowly stood up with the halberd in his hand as he indifferently stared at Palm Deva and said, "Hand over your contribution points. Although your cultivation is 1 level higher than mine, and you're a sword cultivator that focuses on attacking, it's a pity that you're just a new student that has just entered the outer court. You who have not undergone the baptism of the cultivation tower are actually very weak. No matter how high your cultivation is, it's useless." As he spoke, Du Tao walked in front of Palm Deva and spread out his right hand as his gaze was filled with ridicule. "Cultivation tower? I, Palm Deva, will definitely take back everything that happened today." Palm Deva's gaze was filled with unwillingness. However, it was useless no matter how unwilling he was. Although Du Tao's cultivation was lower than his, the total amount of yuan power in his body far exceeded his. The power that he could unleash was definitely several times that of an initial heavenly sovereign. The reason why the origin energy in Du Tao's body was so surging was very likely because he had tempered his meridians in the cultivation pagoda for a long time, allowing his body to contain several times more origin energy than an ordinary person, thus increasing his combat strength by tens of times. After she finished speaking, Palm Master handed over all her contribution points to Du Tao and left the square. Du Tao narrowed his eyes with a tinge of fear. This palm tree's talent was definitely strong enough. If it wasn't for the fact that he was a new student and had never cultivated in the cultivation tower, Du Tao wouldn't be a match for him. Although Du Tao was wary of Palm Tree's ruthless words, he didn't take it to heart. Palm Tree's 9,000 contribution points had been taken by him at the start. His starting point would definitely be slower than ordinary martial artists. And with these 9,000 contribution points, he could stay in the cultivation pagoda for a period of time. At that time, his cultivation could also advance to the Empyrean realm. Even if Pom Pom's meridians were tempered by the cultivation pagoda, and her combat strength increased, Du Tao didn't fear her. After Palm Tree left, other than Imo Lingtian, the other 6 of the 7 new students also left the plaza with bad luck. Boom! Suddenly, an extremely terrifying aura came from not too far away, attracting the attention of many people in the plaza. Even Du Tao and the other 8 people from the Emperor Pavilion cast their gazes over. Shortly after, everyone saw that in the battle between Zhuowen and He Tao had once again used the Heaven Meteor Shower. Countless meteor-like fist energies surged out and enveloped Zhuowen from all directions. He Tao actually used the Heaven Meteor Shower. It seems like this Supreme Being new student is indeed extraordinary. But no matter how extraordinary he is, I'm afraid that he'll be seriously injured under the might of the Heaven Meteor Shower. This new student is going to suffer a great loss this time. Looking at the terrifying meteor-like fist energies, everyone was startled at first, but soon after, a mocking expression appeared on their faces. They knew that Zhuowen's fate would be very tragic under the Heaven Meteor Shower. This new student is pretty amazing to be able to force He Tao to use the Heaven Meteor Shower. Du Tao also stared at the countless meteor-like fist energies with a trace of caution in his eyes. He Tao was slightly stronger than him, and even he would be in a sorry state when facing the Heaven Meteor Shower, let alone this new student, who was only at the Supreme Being realm. Boom! However, the Heaven Meteor Shower only lasted for a brief moment before a pillar of blood soared into the sky. Soon after, demonic aura surged out, and the endless meteor-like fist energies crumbled inch by inch. A young man with blood-red hair and blood-red eyes stepped out of the void with 10 blood spears revolving around his body. He stared coldly at He Tao, causing the latter to involuntarily take a few steps back with an ugly expression on his face. The Heaven Meteor Shower was broken. How did this young man do it? Many older students in the plaza narrowed their eyes as they looked at Zhuowen, who was shrouded in a bloody aura. What a terrifying demonic aura! Could this new student be a demonic cultivator? There was a hint of bewilderment in Du Tao's eyes. Devil cultivators were much stronger than sword cultivators. This was an anomaly among cultivators. Once they succeeded in their cultivation, the battle prowess they could unleash was extremely terrifying. He Tao's expression was extremely grave. It seemed like he had underestimated this young man. No wonder this young man was able to obtain the first place among the new students. It wasn't a fluke, but a true achievement. Kill! Zhuowen stepped out with his blood-red hair fluttering in the wind. Along with the 10 blood spears around him, he instantly rushed towards He Tao. His bloody aura soared into the sky, forming a terrifying blood cloud in the sky. He Tao's eyes flickered. He wasn't afraid of Zhuowen at all. He blasted out a punch. The terrifying fist chi once again transformed into a monstrous meteor that rumbled towards Zhuowen. He wanted to completely crush Zhuowen. The same move doesn't have any effect on me. Zhuowen's indifferent voice sounded. He then waved his right hand, and the 10 blood spears suddenly swept out. One after another, they fell from the sky and heavily smashed in front of He Tao. He Tao's expression changed slightly, and the momentum of his fists changed. Suddenly, the countless meteor showers above him turned into a powerful meteor shower curtain, trying to block the 10 blood spears. Boom! 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 The first blood spear smashed into the meteor shower curtain, and a terrifying force poured out, causing the meteor shower curtain to tremble violently. However, the meteor shower curtain's defense wasn't bad. and it didn't show any signs of shattering. The second spear, the third spear, until the ninth spear, the force was getting stronger and stronger. The meteor shower curtain also began to tremble violently, and faintly visible cracks appeared on its surface. The 10th spear, break for me, Zhuowen shouted in a low voice. When the 10th blood spear finally smashed into the meteor shower curtain, the meteor shower curtain finally trembled violently and completely shattered into countless stars. Pucci, Heitao's expression changed. He felt a terrifying force spread out and heavily smashed into his chest. Then he spat out a mouthful of blood and was forced to retreat 100 meters. He barely managed to stop himself as he stared at Zhuowen in front of him with dread. Silence. At this moment, the square became extremely quiet. Many of the seniors in the square knew how terrifying Heitao's combat strength was. After all, Yun Zhongyang, who was at the initial stage of the heavenly venerable realm, was easily defeated by Heitao. Originally, everyone thought that the battle between Heitao and Zhuowen would be a battle without any suspense. However, the outcome before them had greatly exceeded everyone's expectations. Heitao was defeated, and thoroughly defeated. Du Tao frowned. He didn't expect Heitao to be defeated. Was this venerable realm freshman in front of him that strong? Senior, do you still want my contribution points? Zhuowen took a step forward and instantly arrived 10 meters in front of Heitao. His scarlet eyes stared at Heitao, causing the latter to feel uncomfortable. Forcing a bitter smile, Heitao shook his head and said, Junior, you're very strong, and even this senior admits defeat. I don't want these contribution points. You can keep them for yourself. I'll take my leave first. Just as Heitao was about to leave, Zhuowen took a step forward and blocked Heitao's path. Heitao's expression froze. Junior, what is the meaning of this? Heitao asked helplessly. The corners of Zhuowen's mouth rose slightly and said, Senior, don't you think it's inappropriate for you to leave like this? Senior seems to have a lot of contribution points on you. Why don't you share some with me? Just treat it as a greeting gift from me. As soon as these words came out, Heitao's expression turned extremely ugly. This Zhuowen was giving him a taste of his own medicine. He actually wanted to rob him of his contribution points. What? Senior, do you think this junior's suggestion is inappropriate? As Zhuowen spoke, the demonic intent on his body became even more terrifying. The 10 blood spears all pointed at Heitao, causing Heitao's expression to turn extremely dark. Junior brother is right. It was senior brother who was rude just now. Now that the 10 blood spears were pointed at him, Heitao had no choice but to submit. Although the academy didn't allow killing, there was no rule against crippling someone. If this Zhuowen suddenly took things too hard and crippled him, wouldn't he be done for? Seeing Heitao extend his right hand, Zhuowen also extended his right hand and collected all of Heitao's contribution points. Looking at the contribution points, Zhuowen's eyes revealed a trace of pleasant surprise. This was because his contribution points had increased from 10,000 to 40,000. In other words, Heitao actually had 30,000 contribution points on him. Heitao's wealth wasn't small at all. Senior, thank you for your gift. Zhuowen nodded and waved his right hand. The 10 blood spears that were surrounding Heitao returned to Zhuowen's side. Heitao let out a light sigh, his heart filled with helplessness. He originally came here to rob the freshmen of their contribution points, but he didn't expect that he would be the one to lose his contribution points, because he was inferior. A dignified senior's contribution points were stolen by a freshman. This seemed to be the first time in the academy's history. Junior, senior has some matters to attend to, so I won't stay any longer. Goodbye. After saying this, Heitao immediately fled. A dignified senior's contribution points had been stolen by a freshman. Heitao really didn't have the face to stay any longer. Chapter 1008. Suppressing Du Taowush. After Heitao left, Zhuowen took a step forward and arrived at Emo Lingtian's side. Brother Emo, are you alright? Looking at the pale Emo Lingtian, Zhuowen asked with concern. Emo Lingtian shook his head and smiled bitterly at Zhuowen. Brother Zhua, your strength has truly exceeded my expectations. Even He Tao was forced to flee by you. Zhuowen shook his head and looked at the contribution sheet on Emo Lingtian's wrist. He asked coldly, "Have your contribution points been stolen?" Emo Lingtian was startled at first, but soon after he said bitterly, "It's only 1,000 contribution points. It's not a big loss. 1,000 isn't a small number." Zhuowen muttered. His sharp gaze passed through the crowd and landed on Du Tao's group of 8. He said in a clear voice, "The 8 of you should consciously hand over your contribution points." As soon as these words were spoken, the entire square immediately became silent. The gazes of all the senior students converged on Zhuowen, and there was a trace of a strange expression in their eyes. After snatching He Tao, this kid still didn't give up and planned to snatch the contribution points from Du Tao's group of 8. Although Du Tao's strength was weaker than He Tao's, it wasn't by much. He Tao was only one person, while Du Tao had 8 people. If the 8 of them joined forces, He Tao would have to flee in a sorry state. More importantly, Du Tao was a member of the Emperor Pavilion, one of the most powerful factions in the outer court. His background was much more powerful than He Tao's. As long as one knew Du Tao's background, they wouldn't casually provoke such a character. However, this kid, who had just entered the outer court not long ago, defeated He Tao in a thunderous manner and snatched away He Tao's contribution points. Now he even planned to snatch the contribution points from Du Tao's group of 8. Arrogant. This was everyone's first thought and evaluation of Zhuowen. Du Tao and the others, who were about to leave the square, stopped in their tracks. After witnessing Zhuowen defeat He Tao, Du Tao knew that this new student, who was only at the Supreme Being realm, was a tough nut to crack. Therefore, he didn't want to cause trouble for himself. After all, they had already obtained the contribution points of 8 new students. The harvest this time was already considered pretty good. There was no need to stir up trouble, as that would not benefit them at all. But now, they originally didn't want to provoke this new student, but this new student was actually arrogant enough to provoke them. Moreover, he even wanted them to voluntarily hand over their contribution points. Could it be that this kid's brain was fried? What did you just say? You want us to voluntarily hand over our contribution points? Du Tao looked at Zhuowen, as if he was looking at an idiot, and said coldly. Zhuowen stood up straight and nodded in a serious manner. Am I wrong? If you don't hand over your contribution points, you know the consequences. Du Tao's eyes narrowed dangerously as he said coldly, "It seems that after defeating He Tao, you're very confident in your strength. You even dare to say such words to court death. I don't have time to talk nonsense with you right now. I'm asking you, are you going to hand over your contribution points or not?" Zhuowen said impatiently. Du Tao's face stiffened and immediately revealed a look of anger. This kid is too arrogant. He even showed such an impatient attitude when speaking to me. Is he looking down on me? I originally planned to let you go, but since you took the initiative to provoke me, I won't be polite and will take your contribution points. After saying that, Du Tao stomped his foot and a terrifying aura burst out. The other 7 people beside him also released their auras and stared at Zhuowen with unkind eyes. Du Tao's cultivation was the same as He Tao's, at the peak of the Golden Venerable Realm. The 7 people beside him weren't weak either. They were all at the late-stage Golden Venerable Realm, and their auras were extremely terrifying. Emo Lingtian looked a little worried. He quickly pulled Zhuowen and said, "Brother Zhuowen, I think it's better to forget it. It's just 1,000 contribution points anyway. If you don't want it, then don't. There's no need to add to the trouble." Zhuowen smiled faintly and said, "Brother Mo, don't worry. I will help you get your contribution points back. Since they provoked us, we will let them know that freshmen aren't as easy to bully as they think." After saying that, Zhuowen slowly stepped forward. Terrifying demonic aura surged out, and his blood-red hair fluttered, forming a terrifying blood cloud in the sky. His demonic aura overflowed, and his eyes were full of unruliness. "Brothers, let's let this arrogant kid know the consequences and price of arrogance. Let's attack together." Du Tao shouted loudly. With a stomp of his foot, he brought the other 7 people and rushed towards Zhuowen. They surrounded Zhuowen, and 8 terrifying auras locked onto Zhuowen. Seeing Du Tao command the 7 people to besiege Zhuowen, the other seniors in the square felt that something was wrong. They even looked down on Du Tao's actions. However, they also knew that this freshman Zhuowen was a little abnormal. Although Du Tao thought highly of himself, he also had some self-awareness. Even He Tao had been defeated by Zhuowen, and his strength was still a bit lower than He Tao's. If it was a one-on-one fight, it was absolutely impossible for him to be this freshman's opponent. Besieging him was the safest option. This Du Tao is really despicable. He doesn't dare to fight alone. Instead, he let a group of people besiege him. Under the shade of the tree, Moyan Wuxiang clenched his fist and said with a slightly fluctuating voice. The dean looked at Moyan Wuxiang, who was a little strange, and said, "This little guy is not simple. He might not lose." "Kill!" Du Tao shouted angrily. The sky piercer in his right hand fiercely swung down from the sky. Surging yuan power poured into the sky piercer halberd and turned into a sky full of halberd shadows. Like an endless hurricane, it swept towards Zhuowen. The other 7 people also used their strongest moves and greeted Zhuowen one after another. They didn't hold back. The colorful yuan power gathered together and formed an extremely terrifying energy ball. This ball of light contracted and expanded like a beating heart. It fell from the sky and rushed towards Zhuowen. What a terrifying attack. I didn't expect Du Tao and the others to be serious. They actually joined forces and used their full strength. Looking at the terrifying energy ball, many seniors in the square turned pale. If they were to face the combined attack of Du Tao and the others, they would undoubtedly die. Zhuowen slowly raised his head. The blood-red light in his eyes deepened as an even more terrifying demonic aura erupted from his body. Immediately, his blood-red hair grew wildly, reaching his waist. Second-level bedevilment. An indifferent voice rang out. Zhuowen stretched out his right hand and sucked towards the sky. Suddenly, the blood cloud in the sky descended and fell around Zhuowen. It rolled and surged, forming a protective force. Boom, boom, boom. The 8 people's attacks arrived as expected. Then a violent explosion rang out. Under the collision of the energy, the whole square shook violently. Everyone in the square involuntarily retreated dozens of steps. After everyone stopped, they stared at the explosion ball with fear. They didn't expect the combined attack of Du Tao and the others to be so terrifying. Just the aftermath of the attack had such a terrifying effect. Brother Zhua, Mo Lingtian was the weakest. He almost retreated to the edge of the square. Looking at the figure of Zhuowen, who was completely submerged in the explosion ball, he couldn't help but roar. There was a touch of guilt in his eyes. If Zhuowen didn't stand up for him, he wouldn't have ended up like this. The number 1 new student is only SSO. You actually dared to hoot in front of us. You really don't know what death is. Du Tao floated in midair, looking down at the figure submerged in the explosion ball. His eyes were filled with ridicule. He believed that Zhuowen would be seriously injured, even if he didn't die from this attack. This was the consequence of provoking them. "Oh, you really think that I'm only SSO?" The instant Du Tao finished speaking, a mocking voice suddenly rang out from behind Du Tao, causing Du Tao's entire body to stiffen. He was not unfamiliar with this voice. Wasn't it the new student who had hooted with them earlier? Just as Du Tao was about to turn around, he felt a powerful force rushing towards him from behind. Then he felt a pain on his back. He directly fell from midair and heavily smashed into the ground. Boom! The instant Du Tao smashed onto the ground, Zhuowen followed closely behind. Before Du Tao could get up, Zhuowen ferociously stomped his foot. The terrifying strength caused the entire plaza to tremble. Du Tao even spat out a mouthful of blood and almost fainted. His face was as pale as snow. The remaining 7 people also noticed Zhuowen. Their pupils shrank, and they immediately rushed towards Zhuowen. "Get lost!" Zhuowen shouted. With a wave of his right hand, 7 blood-red mountains fell from the sky and smashed towards the 7 people. These blood-red mountains were formed by Zhuowen's slaughter demon chi. They were extremely terrifying. At this moment, Zhuowen was already in the 2nd level of the bedevilment state. The slaughter demon chi in his body was much more terrifying than the 1st level. Even Yuan Zhao was defeated by Zhuowen when he was in the second level of the bedevilment state, let alone Du Tao and the others. Boom, boom, boom. 7 blood-red mountains fell, heavily pressing down on the 7 people. The 7 people were suppressed on the ground of the square, unable to move at all. Defeated? Du Tao and the others were defeated even after joining forces? The seniors in the square were all stunned. They stared blankly at the 7 people suppressed by the 7 blood-red mountains, and Du Tao who was under Zhuowen's foot. They only felt their minds go blank. If you had consciously handed them over earlier, you wouldn't have to suffer so much physical pain. If you knew this would happen, you wouldn't have done it in the first place. Zhuowen glanced at Du Tao under his foot indifferently. Then, he unceremoniously plundered the contribution points on Du Tao's body. After robbing Du Tao, Zhuowen slowly walked towards the 7 blood-red mountains. Then, he did the same thing, and plundered the contribution points on the others. Among these 8 people, Du Tao's contribution points was undoubtedly the most. He actually had 40,000 contribution points, which was 10,000 more than He Tao's. As for the other 7 people, their contribution points were much less. The 7 of them only had about 20,000 contribution points. In an instant, he had gained 60,000 contribution points. In addition to Zhuowen's original 40,000 contribution points, Zhuowen now had 100,000 contribution points. This was a huge sum. Most of the seniors in the outer court might not be able to gather so many contribution points. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.